This is Zombie. Bro can literally split the earth in half with just his bare hands. At just 1% of his power, he can turn a weak girl into an absolute monster. Like, look at this dude. Bro straight up goes Super Saiyan 3. Seeing that kind of power, this baddie from the Security Association wants to recruit him. But she's not the only one. The villain squad's baddie wants him too. One wants to protect the world, and the other wants him to destroy it. Now both sides are fighting over who gets Zombie, and yeah, these girls are really about to throw hands over it. Meanwhile, my guy, total Chad. Bro's just out here chilling, living his life. But it wasn't always like this. To understand how he got here, we gotta go back a few years. So, this guy is a zombie. No one knows his age or how long he's been gone. He only remembers that one summer day, the whole world just went crazy with a zombie breakout. The apocalypse, you know? It all happened so fast he got bitten before he could escape. Ever since then, he'd just been chilling with the other zombies, kind of just part of the big group. Then one day, humans showed up. They had all these weapons, guns and missiles, and they totally wiped out the zombies. Some of the zombies got burned for fuel, and some were even forced by the humans to become perpetual energy machines, powering the human cities. Zombie never really got why zombies had to eat people, or why humans were so set on getting rid of them all. But he knew one thing: to keep going, he had to get way stronger. That's when he totally changed his life. Every single day, he was intense about fitness. He lifted weights, ran, swam, and jumped. He even ate protein powder for every meal. At night, he'd still be doing cardio. Eventually, Zombie became super powerful, almost unstoppable. Despite all that, he still had this big wish. He wanted to be buddies with humans. To make that dream come true, he started doing heroic stuff. Once, he saved some human kids from a massive fire. Another time, he stopped a speeding train with just one hand, preventing it from crashing into a family. To help his group get along better with people, he gathered all the zombies in an abandoned city. He made a rule that they had to eat eggs every day instead of consuming human flesh for protein. However, today was a bit of a setback. Zombie was at the supermarket grabbing eggs when he saw that his subordinate, Agu, was on a new wanted poster. At the same time, two reporters were secretly filming nearby. They didn't believe the masked guy, who they thought was human, could actually lift an airplane. But what happened next totally blew their minds. Zombie casually lifted a whole truck with one hand. Then, he jumped straight up, broke through the atmosphere with the truck, orbited the earth, and finally landed right in his territory. The other zombies went nuts seeing him, but two young zombies were a little confused and asked why he didn't just drive the truck over. Zombie replied coolly that he didn't have a driver's license. Meanwhile, the various boss-level zombies inside were getting restless, but when Zombie opened the door, his crew immediately snapped to attention in two neat rows. Zombie slapped the wanted poster onto Agao and demanded to know why the humans wanted him again. Agao stammered an explanation, saying he just couldn't control himself when he saw humans. He pointed out that while their numbers were growing, they kept having to move their base to stay clear of humans. Another zombie, Varmint, suggested they should just start a conflict with the humans, complaining that his chainsaw was starting to rust from disuse. But just as Zombie was about to warn them about how terrifying humans could be, a huge roaring sound filled the sky. It was a military transport jet that had shown up right above them without anyone noticing. Inside the jet, the commander was this really sharp young woman, looking intensely at the data screen. Two subordinates reported that everything was set and they could proceed whenever the order was given. The girl tilted her head slightly and asked about the payload. It turned out the plane was carrying an armed nuclear warhead set to go off in 20 minutes. Down on the ground, Zombie immediately sensed the major danger. Varmint's eyes flashed, and he was ready to rush up and battle them until the very end. But Zombie quickly stopped him, explaining that Varmint always lost control around humans. He ordered everyone to evacuate the other zombies first, saying he would take care of the humans himself. Soon after, several armored trucks slowly rolled into the area. Their job was to look for any civilians on the ground and get them out. Just then, the military jet's door suddenly opened. A young man, completely decked out in gear, stood there, facing the huge crowd of zombies below. He wasn't scared at all. In fact, he boasted that he'd take down a boss zombie if one appeared. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a man in a white robe was watching the whole thing on a screen. He noted to himself that the young man looked like he was from the Beyonders Academy. He smiled slightly, saying he wanted to have some fun with them. After that, he hit a red button. Immediately, a cage full of people dropped from the sky and landed right in the middle of the zombie crowd. At the same time, the human rescue team detected signs of human life and slowly moved forward with their weapons ready. A person in the rescue team pointed and wondered why a certain zombie wouldn't go down. They were looking at two young, shaking zombies huddled together, with Zombie standing right in front of them. Suddenly, the squad leader aimed a rocket launcher. The rocket flew fast and engulfed Zombie in a huge explosion in flames. Then, someone else suggested that the figure wasn't a zombie but actually a Beyonder, the masked hero who had been helping people lately. Hearing this, the squad leader was totally confused. He realized he had hit the wrong person. As the smoke cleared, Zombie stood there completely unharmed, scratching his head with a bewildered look. At that moment, the president on the military jet reported that a boss zombie had been detected and ordered the marshal to head to Zone B to intercept it. As soon as she finished speaking, the marshal leaped out of the military jet, dropping 100 meters through the air. While the rescue team started getting the civilians out, the man in the white robe was getting ready to cause more trouble. He observed that they had rescued almost all the civilians and admitted they shouldn't underestimate the heroes. The man smiled slightly and tilted his head, suggesting they should give the rescuers something interesting to deal with. The man with green hair instantly got the message. Soon, under his control, one of the zombies in the crowd started a terrifying transformation. Before long, that zombie had turned into a terrifying, mindless monster. Zombies sensed this change from a distance. Just then, the rescue team squad leader suddenly ran toward Zombie. While Zombie was still looking confused, the squad leader quickly grabbed him and ran back to the vehicle, saying saving a life was the priority. After tossing Zombie inside, the squad leader told the driver to go fast. Inside the armored vehicle, a girl asked Zombie why he always wore a zombie mask. Zombie looked nervous, unsure how to respond. Meanwhile, the other part of the rescue team ran into serious trouble. The newly mutated zombie lifted a whole bus and violently threw it at them. Luckily, the marshal showed up just in time and sliced the bus in half with a single strike. The crowd cheered, recognizing him as the marshal from the academy's swordsmanship department, saying they were saved. The marshal instructed them to quickly take the civilians and leave, assuring them he would handle the rest. Back at the evacuation center, the squad leader wanted a report on the situation at the site. Zombie, listening to the commotion, thought he recognized the voice of the mutated zombie. It sounded like his subordinate, Little Nine. The girl next to him turned to comfort him, but he had already slipped away. The mutated zombie suddenly let out a gut-wrenching scream. The marshal seemed to feel its pain. As the zombie lunged at him, the marshal drew his sword and made a simple crosscut. Numerous cracks appeared all over the zombie's surface. With a loud crash, it broke into countless pieces. However, just when he thought he was done, footsteps interrupted his thoughts. The marshal turned and saw that Zombie had somehow arrived right next to the shattered zombie. Zombie said apologetically that it wasn't the zombie's fault and explained that they simply couldn't control themselves. Hearing this, the marshal instantly assumed Zombie was one of the enemies and raised his sword to strike him. But in the next second, the marshal was somehow stripped of his clothes and left hanging on a utility pole. The short-haired girl on the military jet noticed something was wrong, reporting that the marshal's vital signs were dropping fast. The president was shocked, realizing the marshal had been defeated. She panicked, knowing they couldn't detonate the nuclear warhead yet because the civilians hadn't all been evacuated. Furious, the president blurred out of the military jet in a flash. She quickly drew her sword and slashed it at Zombie. But in the next second, her white blade shattered on impact. The president stared in disbelief, and Zombie looked even more confused. Her eyes widened in surprise as she wondered out loud what that thing was made of. She quickly jumped back several meters. Zombie, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of this president, nervously offered another apology. Hearing the zombie speak, the president was hugely shocked, concluding he must be some kind of powerful mutant or variant, but she decided a zombie was still a zombie and drew a second sword, declaring that since that was the case, she would have to use a special enchanted blade meant for stronger opponents. Zombie was shocked by her actions and cried out for her to wait, but before he could finish, the president charged at him at top speed. However, her strike missed completely. Zombie reappeared behind her, having easily avoided the attack. She reacted instantly, doing the same maneuver but now upside down in the air behind him. She then performed a full 360-degree spin, using her technique called the red blade cleave. In an instant, everything the red light touched was neatly sliced in two, including the buildings on either side. Under such a powerful attack, Zombie just bent over and easily dodged it. The president was frustrated and shouted that he was toying with her before charging again. Meanwhile, the civilian evacuation was almost finished, and even the marshal, whom Zombie had knocked out, was loaded into a vehicle. The assistant on the military jet urgently radioed the president, telling her to retreat fast. Engaged in the intense clash with Zombie, she had no time to listen. In just a few moments, the human and the zombie had covered nearly half the city. Zombie had spent the whole time just avoiding the president. She yelled at him, asking why he was running. Zombie, confused, said it was because she was just going to slice him. Seeing she couldn't catch him, the president immediately activated her second technique, Ido Level 2. A large amount of white steam suddenly burst from her mechanical calves. Once the charge was complete, she shot out at incredible speed, instantly appearing behind Zombie and then unleashed her most powerful move. In just a moment, both landed back on the ground. The president thought she had dealt with Zombie and was contacting the military jet for pickup. Just then, the mysterious man in the white robe started to make his move again. The civilians had all been saved, but the white-robed man revealed they still had a spy on the aircraft and planned to use him. Just as everyone was celebrating the successful rescue, the spy on the military jet suddenly opened the nuclear warhead launcher and pressed the button without hesitation. In the next second, the nuclear warhead dropped from the military aircraft. By then, the spy had been restrained by two others in the cabin. When they reported the news, everyone's faces were filled with fear. Watching the nuclear warhead plummeting rapidly, the president started to panic. She quickly tried to use her mechanical leg boosters to jump back to the military jet, but she suddenly froze. It turned out that her intense fight with Zombie had completely drained her batteries. While the president was panicking, Zombie suddenly appeared in front of her. Before she could react, Zombie grabbed her, spun her around, and threw her high into the sky. She landed perfectly back on her military aircraft. It took her a moment to recover, and then she realized the nuclear warhead was heading straight for Zombie. At this point, the warhead was less than 1,000 meters from the ground. However, Zombie showed no intention of dodging. He pushed hard against the ground with his foot, and the next second, the ground cracked as he launched himself into the air. For the sake of his people, he bravely flew up to meet the nuclear warhead head-on. Just as he was about to touch the warhead, Zombie stretched out his fingers as if to catch it. He then completely flattened the warhead. Seeing this, everyone was completely stunned. The next second, a massive boom shook the air, and a huge, bright mushroom cloud rose. Zombie was totally engulfed in the flames. As the flames slowly faded in the ruins, the president on the military jet suddenly looked totally bewildered. A figure emerged from the smoke. Zombie casually scratched his head, saying that the blast had made his butt itch. Meanwhile, the commander on the jet started to look really down. She wondered aloud what was up with the president. She explained to a subordinate, "Think about it. The president has spent her whole life combating zombies, and now she's been rescued by one. How could she possibly be happy?" The subordinate quickly corrected her, holding up Zombie's information, and said that she seemed mistaken. He clarified that Zombie wasn't a zombie but the masked hero who had recently taken to wearing a zombie mask. Hearing this, the president's face instantly darkened. The next day, a figure in tattered clothes arrived in the human city. Zombie quickly slipped into a phone booth. Once he found out that his subordinates had gotten to safety, he finally felt relieved. However, everything he did in the city was being recorded by surveillance cameras. Just as he was returning to his rental house in his underwear, the president, watching the surveillance feed, figured out where he was. At that moment, Zombie felt that creepy sensation of being watched. Watching the almost naked Zombie, the girl on the screen also looked completely flustered. That day, Zombie was going through his usual exercise routine, wondering if his family had settled in yet. But just then, his door was suddenly kicked open. The person who entered was the president he had just saved. As soon as she was inside, she ordered her subordinates to start moving his stuff. While Zombie was still confused, the president suddenly pulled out an admission notice and shoved it in front of him. She announced that they were from the Beyonders Academy and that he had been accepted. She informed him that from now on he was officially a member of their academy. After saying this, she pointed at Zombie. Several men in suits immediately stepped forward to carry out her orders. Zombie looked at them, protesting and asking if zombies could even go to school. But the president firmly said he was just a human who liked wearing a zombie mask. And just like that, poor Zombie was forced to enroll at the Beyonders Academy. At this point, the red-haired girl, Dawn, mentioned to the president that it wasn't right to recruit people so casually. She also pointed out that the academy dorms were all planned out and wouldn't have any space for him. The president immediately replied that Zombie could just stay with her for the time being. Zombie looked totally out of place in the president's room. Since the president wasn't saying anything, Zombie broke the silence by asking if he would really be living and sleeping there from now on. The president, whose name was Violet, snapped back, asking if that wasn't obvious, and then glared at him, asking if he actually wanted to sleep with her. Hearing this, Zombie quickly waved his hands, insisting that wasn't what he meant, though he admitted he was a little curious. Violet simply told him he would stay in the guest room. Zombie tried one more time to come clean, telling her she might be mistaken because he wasn't actually human. Violet ignored him and started messing with her lower leg. As Zombie watched, puzzled, she detached her own leg. She explained that she had cut off her legs herself. It turned out that when Violet was young, her village had a zombie outbreak. Not only did her parents turn into zombies, but they bit her lower legs. To survive, she had to cut off her own legs, and she had personally finished her parents who had become infected. From that day on, Violet swore she would eliminate any zombie she ever saw. Hearing this, Zombie quickly kept the truth about himself being a zombie totally quiet. When Violet asked what he had been about to say, Zombie quickly pretended she must have misheard him, insisting he hadn't said a thing. To stop the awkwardness, Zombie quickly changed the topic and asked what the Beyonders Academy was all about. Violet explained the history. It had been over 1,000 years since the zombie breakout. To keep humanity going, their ancestors had started the academy to train people to handle the infected. Hearing this, Zombie couldn't help but remember what he looked like when he first turned. He hadn't realized a whole millennium had passed. Violet told him he needed to show up at the academy tomorrow. She warned him that if he tried to run away, they would definitely investigate why he was trying to leave. She then introduced herself, saying her name was Violet, and that someone named Dawn would show him around the next day. Zombie wondered if he already knew this human. He was so deep in thought that he jumped when Dawn, the red-haired girl, greeted him. This startled Dawn, and she immediately started telling Zombie off. She then marched into the academy, saying it was time for the entrance exam. Zombie quickly jogged to catch up, asking if he really had to take an entrance exam. It turned out that all the students at the academy had special abilities, and if someone didn't meet the standards, the academy wouldn't let them in. Soon they arrived at the examination area. The square was already packed with hundreds of new students, each one looking pretty odd in their own way. Since there were so many people, Dawn had to climb up and sit on Zombie's head just to look around. Zombie asked if his previous act of lifting an airplane meant he didn't have to take the exam. Dawn replied that lifting planes was considered a very common ability there and that nobody paid attention to the news. An older man with a wooden leg slowly walked toward the stage. He introduced himself as the examiner, but said they could call him Chen, the sports department's president. He explained that the academy had been around for centuries and had trained many talented people. He said he hoped they would all train hard like the students before them and become excellent. A student then asked what would happen if a zombie managed to sneak in among the students. Chen replied, very casually, that they would of course chop it into pieces and subject it to a public castration. Hearing this, Zombie felt a shiver run down his spine. Then it was time for the entrance exam. The first test was a speed competition. At the sound of the starting shot, the students shot forward like arrows. In just 3 seconds, one student had already completed a whole lap around the track. Zombie, still standing there, looked completely confused. Soon, it was time for the second test, which was shooting. Dawn raised her gun with style and fired several bullets instantly. In the next second, all the dummy heads on the targets were shot off. To avoid giving away his true nature, Zombie made sure to be cautious and keep a low profile. His scores in every test were just barely above the passing mark. For example, when others had to run 100 meters in under 10 seconds to pass, he ran it in 9.5–7 seconds. When others had to throw a shot put over 80 meters, he threw it exactly 80.1 meters. Despite his efforts to blend in, Zombie's actions still caught the examiner's eye. Chen looked at the data in his hand, deep in thought. He noted that Zombie's scores were just above the passing mark in all subjects, but the president of the swordsmanship department had told him Zombie was very powerful. He wondered if Zombie was deliberately pretending to be weak. Soon, the next test arrived, javelin throwing. A red-haired young man put all his strength into the throw. The javelin shot out incredibly fast and instantly hit the lower body of a target dummy. Zombie felt another chill down his spine. He saw that the javelin had pierced through 3 zombie targets. Even then, it didn't slow down, finally embedding itself in a road sign 32 kilometers away. After the red-haired man finished, it was Zombie's turn. As he walked past, the red-haired man looked at Zombie with obvious dislike. Zombie didn't react much and stepped forward to pick up the javelin, planning to throw just enough to pass. But at that moment, Chen suddenly stopped him. This immediately drew the attention of many people watching. Chen addressed Zombie, saying he was the one the swordsmanship department president had vouched for, claiming he was very strong, yet his scores were always just passing. Chen asked if Zombie was hiding something. He pointed out that everyone else was giving it their all, and by deliberately holding back, he made Chen wonder if Zombie wasn't actually a person. Zombie quickly shook his head, insisting he was human. Chen said that if Zombie could throw the javelin 3 kilometers, he would consider him passed. But if he couldn't meet that, Chen would send him to be castrated on the charge of being a spy. Zombie was completely stunned. Since turning into a zombie, he had lived a life of secrecy. He exercised every day to avoid being captured and turned into an energy machine by humans. Thinking to himself, Zombie decided to throw the javelin as hard as he possibly could. With that decision, he raised the javelin in his hand. As a red light flashed in his eyes, a huge burst of power swept across the entire examination field. In an instant, the javelin flew into space. It pierced a satellite clean through. Even then, the javelin kept going toward the moon. The force of Zombie's throw was so great that the students at the examination site were lifted right off the ground. Chen stared at the ground, which was crushed under Zombie's foot, exploding in disbelief. What he didn't know was that the javelin had punched a hole clear through the moon. Zombie was indeed the strongest zombie on Earth, capable of catching nuclear warheads bare-handed and shooting through the moon with a single javelin throw. At that moment, Dawn excitedly ran up to Zombie, praising how incredibly impressive he was. Zombie, feeling a bit embarrassed, said he had just tried his best, as instructed, but what they didn't realize was that the hole the javelin made in the moon had also created an asteroid. After qualifying, Zombie asked if he could go home now. Dawn was surprised, suggesting that with his strength, he could easily become a department president. She explained that as a president, he would have massive influence, able to command an army, use nuclear weapons, and the government would even give him a city to run. Mayors, she said, were just a department president's staff. However, Zombie didn't seem interested, as he already had countless zombie residents under his command. Dawn then took him to the biotech department, which also served as the logistics hub for developing new gear and weapons. There, Zombie noticed a photograph of a family of 4. Dawn immediately introduced the man in glasses as Professor Jaime, who used to be the department president. She explained that after his wife passed away, he became obsessed with dangerous experiments involving zombies and humans. Eventually, he was kicked out of the academy, and a finish order was even put out against him. The 2 male figures in the picture looked strikingly similar to the mysterious individuals who had caused trouble earlier. Just then, a girl approached and asked if they were new students. Curious, Zombie looked at her. Dawn whispered that this girl was an orphan adopted by Professor Jaime and was now the acting department president. The biotech president then asked what kind of equipment the 2 of them needed. Dawn said she wanted gear that would help her easily carry weapons, like trousers that could hide her Gatling gun. The girl showed no reaction to this and looked toward Zombie. Zombie thought for a moment. He didn't need weapons, but he was always left naked after a clash, so he thought indestructible clothing would be perfect. The biotech president was left speechless by both requests. Meanwhile, at the sword department, the marshal, who had lost earlier, was kneeling and being scolded by a tall blue-haired girl in black stockings. He explained that the person who defeated him was extremely strong. He had charged at him, and the next thing he knew, everything went dark and he was hanging on a utility pole. Hearing this, the girl became interested, set down her book, and slowly moved closer, asking for the name of the person who did that. That day, the teacher was explaining how to spot traps and capture zombies, while Zombie was busy taking notes below. Dawn leaned in and asked what he was doing. Zombie, without looking up, said he needed to take the key points back to tell his family. Dawn was completely confused by this. Just then, the loudspeaker suddenly announced that all new students should gather at the gymnasium. Though puzzled, Zombie and Dawn quickly arrived at the meeting point. As they ate ice cream and wondered what was going on, Violet suddenly appeared, telling them to behave as this was a very important meeting. A tall, blue-haired beauty was watching Zombie from a distance. Her name was Zhang Lanqi, the president of the sword department. She and Violet of the swordsmanship department were longtime rivals, so she had come to see how strong this zombie that Violet had introduced really was. Seeing Zombie's relaxed attitude, Zhang Lanqi told her subordinate to test him later. Meanwhile, several mysterious figures suddenly appeared at the gymnasium entrance. The one in front was the so-called chief, the president of the mechanical lifeform department. Seeing the chief walk in, everyone respectfully bowed. Dawn, seeing Zombie looking clueless, quickly pushed his head down to bow to the chief. At that moment, the chief glanced at Zhang Lanqi next to him and warned her not to cause any trouble. Hearing this, Zhang Lanqi had no choice but to wave her hand, signaling that she would leave immediately. Her subordinate asked if they were just going to let Zombie go. Zhang Lanqi's eyes twinkled and she smiled, saying the chief's matters were more important than Zombie, and she only respected the strongest people. The chief walked up to Violet and patted her on the shoulder to acknowledge her hard work. Zombie asked Dawn who this chief was. Dawn, thinking Zombie was jealous, started explaining the chief's background. It turned out he was Professor Jaime's greatest creation, an evolved version of humans. Out of tens of thousands of test subjects, only he had survived. After Professor Jaime was expelled, the chief started the mechanical lifeform department. In the city he ruled, there hadn't been a zombie outbreak for 10 years, and any zombie that crossed his path turned into ash. Hearing this, Zombie felt a shiver run down his spine. Just then, the chief began the meeting. It turned out the spy they had caught still hadn't revealed anything. Hearing that the spy was the one who had secretly launched the nuclear warhead, Zombie was furious, realizing that this was the guy who had bombed him. The discussion about the traitor, Professor Jaime, made Zombie wonder if the threat of zombies had actually passed, and if all the tensions were just due to internal conflict. Dawn confirmed that was the situation. The chief then offered a challenge. If anyone could make the spy reveal Professor Jaime's hiding place, that person would be made a vice president. Hearing this, the new students in the gym erupted in excitement, all raising their hands eagerly to try. But 2 hours passed, and the spy still hadn't budged. Whether it was painful treatment, mock castration, or any other kind of torment, he just wouldn't talk. The scene had even become bizarre, with some students banging drums and gongs, and others even trying to recite religious scriptures. Violet had a major headache watching all this. She asked Zombie if he had a way to make the spy speak. Immediately after, Dawn raised her hand and volunteered Zombie. Surprisingly, Zombie stepped forward and agreed to try to make the spy talk. This move stunned Dawn. Zombie had always kept a low profile, so why was he suddenly taking the initiative? It turned out Zombie wanted to find out from the spy why his subordinates were suddenly losing control. Soon, Zombie arrived at the room where the spy was held. The spy glanced at Zombie without any fear and then turned his head away, telling him to bring whatever kind of torment they had. But after waiting a while, Zombie just stood there silently. The spy taunted him, asking if the school had no one else to send, mocking Zombie and saying he wasn't even afraid of castration. So was Zombie just trying to tickle him? Zombie didn't get angry, but calmly told him to stand up. As soon as he said it, the spy actually stood up obediently. The onlookers were completely shocked, wondering how he had managed that. As it turned out, Zombie had quickly made a small cut on the spy's arm and implanted a zombie virus into the wound. The virus spread rapidly, quickly taking over the spy's entire brain. The spy became instantly obedient, not only telling Zombie his own name but also complying with every question Zombie asked. At that moment, Dawn and Violet were completely speechless. They hadn't expected Zombie to have the ability to control other people's minds. Zombie then asked the spy why those zombies, who were normally very gentle, had suddenly started losing control. The spy revealed that Professor Jaime had scattered a kind of drug over the city, and any zombie that touched it would go totally crazy. He said Professor Jaime was then ordering them to clash with the Beyonders Academy folks to gather data. Zombie asked why he would do such a thing. The spy just said he didn't know the exact reason, only that Professor Jaime was collecting data to achieve something even bigger. Finally, he gave up Professor Jaime's hiding spot, 500 meters underground in H City. Zombie suddenly turned away, and speaking in the zombie language, told the spy that he had implanted a virus in his brain, and that he could trigger it to end his own life. As soon as Zombie finished, the spy numbly agreed and then passed away. When Zombie walked out of the interrogation room, Everyone looked at him in total horror. Even Violet got cold sweats. However, Zhang Lanqi, the president of the sword department, watched him with definite interest. Up on the stage, the chief clapped and said Zombie did a great job, acknowledging that the younger generation was definitely taking over. After that, the chief asked Zombie to come with him to register as a vice president. Zhang Lanqi looked confused, wondering aloud when vice presidents had to register for their position. Watching Zombie slowly follow the chief toward the back door of the gym, Zhang Lanqi couldn't help but follow along with her subordinate. Meanwhile, 500 meters underground in a ruined city, someone reported to Professor Jaime that their spy had confessed. Professor Jaime wasn't panicked at all and just told them to let the academy come. His green-haired subordinate was shocked, pointing out that those people weren't easy to deal with. Professor Jaime, however, calmly walked over to his experimental equipment. He said it was actually good they were coming, since the experiment was almost done anyway, and he wanted them to witness a historic moment, the birth of a new life form. The scene jumped back to the academy, where the chief had taken Zombie to a derelict industrial area. At this point, Zombie was puzzled, asking why they were going somewhere so abandoned when they were supposed to be registering him. The chief then asked Zombie when he had learned to speak human language. Zombie was visibly stunned, but before he could reply, the chief suddenly turned and fired his arm cannon right at him. With a loud bang, Zombie's head was completely vaporized by an energy beam, which nearly hit Zhang Lanqi, who was secretly following them. Zhang Lanqi's subordinate noted that the chief's tachyon cannon was terrifying. The chief, looking at the headless zombie, felt smug, saying he didn't know how zombies sneaked into the academy, but zombies were weak to head trauma, and Zombie had the misfortune of running into him. While the chief was feeling pleased with himself, the previously motionless zombie suddenly zipped toward him, grabbing the chief's neck in the next second. With a crash, the chief was slammed into the wall. Just then, several robots flew down from the sky and started intensely attacking Zombie. Zombie quickly fought back and attacked the robots, giving the chief a chance to put some distance between them. But the chief was shocked by what he saw. Zombie, now headless, was absolutely crushing all the robots in the arena with just his bare hands. After Zombie took care of all the robots, the chief was astonished, wondering what kind of creature this was. A headless zombie that was still so strong. Zhang Lanqi and her subordinate, hiding nearby, were also totally dumbfounded. Zombie then launched himself forward with massive force, and in the next second, he was right next to the chief. Surprisingly, the chief was fast too, dodging Zombie's strikes while still managing to counterattack. His particle cannon shot missed Zombie, who quickly ducked. The chief was overwhelmed, wondering how this guy could still be so quick without a head, but there was no time to think as Zombie's fist was already flying toward him. In a tight moment, the chief quickly zipped backward, flashing dozens of meters away to create space. Zhang Lanqi's subordinate worried about the chief, but Zhang Lanqi knew the chief was just starting to get serious. Meanwhile, Zombie suddenly transformed. His head, which had been destroyed, inexplicably grew back. Seeing this, Zhang Lanqi and her subordinate were completely baffled, asking what kind of creature he was. Zombie calmly suggested they talk, saying he genuinely didn't want to harm the chief. The chief, feeling the small mark Zombie had left on his neck, slowly started to remove his outer clothes, asking if Zombie wanted to control his mind too. He said Zombie was out of luck. Just then, a robot flew through the air. As it was about to reach the chief, it broke apart and immediately attached itself to the chief. As the white fog faded, the chief was covered in mechanical armor. He declared that he was a mechanical life form and never talked to zombies. He told Zombie he should feel honored to be the first person to see him in this form. After saying that, the chief charged at Zombie with incredible speed. In an instant, Zombie was kicked hard in the chin. Before Zombie could even hit the ground, the chief zipped underneath him and delivered a powerful punch to his chest. The huge force sent Zombie flying 100 meters into the air. The two spectators were speechless, asking if this was the chief's true power. The chief then quickly flew above Zombie and unleashed a barrage of blows that bounced Zombie around in the sky like a pinball. After pummeling Zombie with countless punches, the chief decided he'd done enough. He teleported in front of Zombie and violently stomped him down into the ground. Just as Zombie hit the ground, the chief landed, and his chest suddenly glowed with red energy. In the next second, a powerful energy beam shot out at Zombie, strong enough to destroy the surrounding buildings. The chief finally stopped, taking a breath, and decided that Zombie must be completely destroyed now. But as the smoke cleared, Zombie walked out, completely unharmed. The chief was in utter disbelief. At that moment, Zombie suddenly let out a massive roar toward the sky, and the terrifying force nearly knocked Zhang Lanqi and her subordinate, who were hundreds of meters away, off their feet. The chief's mech suit cracked instantly from the sheer pressure. As Zombie stopped roaring and slowly turned around, the two people watching the fight were absolutely terrified. Zombie had transformed into his second form. This change caused all kinds of weird weather phenomena. A typhoon started swirling furiously around Zombie, even affecting the sky over the whole city. Dawn, seeing this from a distance, was completely stunned, while Zhang Lanqi, who was right there, was so scared she could only stutter. As everyone was confused, Zombie, still in the abandoned area, said he had given them enough chances to settle this peacefully by talking. The chief was momentarily stunned, but just as he was about to talk back, back. Zombie suddenly tilted his head and gave a wicked smile, asking him how he would like to perish. This eerie scene terrified Zhang Lanqi and her subordinate, who noted that not only had Zombie's appearance changed, but his personality seemed different too. The two immediately decided to run away at high speed, prioritizing their safety. However, the chief, still standing his ground, didn't consider his situation at all, arrogantly claiming that no zombie had ever scared him. With that, he aggressively challenged the transformed zombie to battle. Meanwhile, Zhang Lanqi and her subordinate, who had gotten quite a distance away, thought they were safe when a figure suddenly zoomed past them. They were shocked to see that the chief had been smashed by Zombie's punch. Before they could react, Zombie had already teleported right in front of them. The chief frantically called for his robots, but before they could arrive, Zombie blasted them, causing another explosion. Zhang Lanqi and her subordinate, still airborne, were also knocked down by the shockwave. The chief desperately shouted at them to help finish that dangerous zombie, but Zhang Lanqi had no intention of getting involved, angrily asking why the chief had provoked it in the first place. The three then scattered in different directions. However, Zombie, watching them, didn't move. Instead, he raised his right hand and violently plunged it into the ground. The next second, the previously calm city began to shake. Zhang Lanqi, who was still trying to escape, was suddenly shocked when a concrete road unexpectedly shot up and blocked her path. The chief nearby was also hit by the suddenly emerging road. It turned out that Zombie had actually lifted the entire new city that was under development. Everyone who saw this was dumbfounded, wondering what on earth was going on and if there had been an earthquake. Dawn, watching from afar, could hardly believe she was seeing a deserted city being lifted into the air. At that moment, Zombie on the battlefield suddenly exerted his strength. With a loud bang, he moved incredibly fast toward the chief. In an instant, Zombie placed a hand on the chief's forehead, wearing a wicked, mischievous smile. He asked the chief if he was scared now, noting that while he couldn't control robots, it looked like the chief's brain wasn't made of machinery. While gripping the chief's head, countless zombie viruses instantly took over the chief's entire brain. Zombie then pulled out some memories from the chief's mind. Surprisingly, the seemingly unbeatable chief was also a sad figure. At the age of 5, his parents had passed away in an accident. Afterward, he was captured by Professor Jaime for human enhancement experiments, meaning almost everything below his head was no longer normal. Seeing this, Zombie couldn't help but feel sorry for him, wondering if living like that didn't make him more of a walking corpse than the zombies. He loosened his grip and unexpectedly let the chief go. Watching from below, Zhang Lanqi quickly rushed over to catch the chief, who was barely alive. She was also terrified, realizing Zombie also had the ability to read memories. Later that night, Zombie hurried back to his dorm, packing his bags and thinking about how he had again failed to control his emotions. Now that he had revealed his true power, it was best to run away. But just as he was about to leave with his bags, Violet suddenly appeared and stopped him. Zombie felt helpless. He truly was a kind-hearted zombie who really disliked conflict. But for his freedom, he turned around and charged at Violet. However, at that moment, she held up a letter of appointment, saying that from today onward, he was officially a vice president of the Beyonders Academy. Zombie was utterly baffled, but the appointment letter in front of him looked real. He asked if the chief had stamped the seal himself and if he hadn't said anything else. Violet tilted her head slightly and said the chief had only mentioned that Zombie was a very good human. Meanwhile, on the other side, when Zhang Lanqi learned that the chief intended to keep Zombie, a look of shock appeared on her face. However, the chief stated that whether Zombie was a zombie or a human didn't matter anymore. The main thing was that he could help them catch Professor Jaime. The chief then asked Zhang Lanqi about the preparations for the operation. Hearing this, Zhang Lanqi confirmed everything was ready and they could leave immediately. She said she hoped they could successfully capture Professor Jaime this time. The scene switched to an abandoned town, where Varmint furiously yelled that their king had been captured by humans and asked what they should do if the humans took him from them. The zombie underlings shouted they would finish the humans and rescue their king, though some insisted their king couldn't possibly be captured. After a few calm days, an aircraft carrier suddenly appeared at sea. The chief stood in the command center, shouting into the microphone that they only had one chance and absolutely had to capture Professor Jaime. Soon, they arrived at the ruined city where Professor Jaime was hiding. Zombie and Dawn casually strolled through the city as if they were just window shopping. Just then, a group of human armed forces suddenly appeared. As soon as they saw Zombie, they all snapped to attention and saluted him. This action completely confused Zombie. A captain stepped forward and reported that starting today, the 56th Regiment, consisting of 120,000 people, would follow Vice President Zombie's orders. In an effort to catch Professor Jaime, the chief had actually given Zombie a whole group of human troops to command. Looking at the 120,000 soldiers now under him, Zombie jokingly asked if they would even end their own lives if he told them to right then. As soon as he finished speaking, a soldier immediately pulled out a hand grenade and yelled that it was an honor. Sir! Zombie was completely baffled and started shouting that it was only a joke. However, At that moment, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Someone was saying he didn't understand why they had put such a newbie in charge of such an important strategic position and advised Zombie to hide behind them later to avoid being accidentally hurt. Zombie asked if they were the two heads of the Steel Blade Department from Stainless Steel Academy. Meanwhile, on the aircraft carrier, a young man in armor scoffed. This was Chief Gang of the Stainless Steel Academy. He asked if the Beyonders Academy had no one left to send a rookie to guard such a key strategic point. Violet shot back that he was asked there to help, not to pry into their business, and confidently added that Zombie could beat him until he cried. This comment left the chief of the Stainless Steel Academy completely dismissive, though he mentioned he had already sent reinforcements anyway. Meanwhile, in Professor Jaime's underground control room, a subordinate reported that everyone had entered the city. Ming-Ji replied with a wicked smile, telling them to release the zombies. After he pressed a button, countless zombies immediately surged towards Zombie and his group. At that moment, the green-haired subordinate suddenly noticed something strange mixed in with the zombie horde. It turned out that Varmint had gathered the zombies to attack the humans, but the next day, only one person followed him, and after handing Varmint a can of gasoline, he scurried off, mentioning that he didn't dare defy the king's orders. Hearing this, Varmint helplessly said they just wouldn't let the king know about it. He called the others cowards, claiming he could finish all the humans by himself. But just then, he curiously took a sniff of a green capsule floating in the air. Seeing this, the green-haired subordinate was immediately overjoyed. He hadn't expected this zombie to have such high attributes. The green-haired subordinate burst into laughter, telling Varmint to show him how strong he really was. Meanwhile, on the ground, the weaker zombies were quickly wiped out. Zombie looked at the zombie casualties in front of him and asked if these weren't from his group. Dawn quickly turned her head, giving him a look that said, "I don't know anything." Just then, the president of the Steel Blade Department walked up and mocked them, telling the weaklings to go home to their mothers and stop getting in the way. But before he could finish, a series of roars came from a distance. Everyone looked over and saw Zombie's subordinate, Varmint. Zombie was confused, asking what Varmint was doing there. Varmint didn't answer, but instead chugged the gasoline in his hand. Dawn was completely shocked. Suddenly, Varmint pulled the cord on his chainsaw, and the roaring sound of the engine filled the entire area. Varmint roared at the sky and charged furiously toward the group. The nearby buildings started to crack, and Dawn, who was directly in his path, was blown away. Zombie, however, stood completely steady and unfazed. Dawn screamed in terror, asking what that guy was. At that moment, the totally out-of-control Varmint yelled that he was going to wipe out all the humans. The president of the Steel Blade Department suddenly got interested, saying, "Not bad, finally a decent zombie." Meanwhile, Zombie was dragging Dawn away in a desperate run. Dawn was confused, asking why they were running when the president of the Steel Blade Department was right there. Zombie simply told her that they couldn't finish Varmint. Dawn was very surprised, noting that Varmint truly had an immortal body. However, their escape looked like pure fear to the president of the Steel Blade Department. Just as he was about to mock them, the vice president beside him was sent flying by a punch from Varmint, crashing right into a tank behind them. At that moment, the president of the Steel Blade Department reacted and quickly turned back, confused, but the vice president was already down and couldn't speak. When the president turned back again, Varmint was somehow already in front of him. A sound of rapid, heavy punches erupted as the president was bounced between the buildings. Inside the control room, the green-haired subordinate exclaimed that Varmint's power level was incredible and that the president of the Steel Blade Department was in deep trouble. Just as the president thought he could counterattack, Varmint slapped him, sending him spinning, and then kicked him hundreds of meters away, where he crashed into his vice president. Both the president and vice president of the Steel Blade Department were now incapacitated. Varmint teleported in front of them, raised his chainsaw, and viciously swung it down. But somehow, the president still had the strength to block it with his steel armor. On a distant rooftop, Zombie and two others were calmly watching the whole thing. Dawn cried out, saying it looked like the president of the Steel Blade Department couldn't hold out much longer. Surprisingly, the previously arrogant president was now being beaten by Varmint, crying and yelling for his mother. Seeing this, Dawn and the others looked dismayed. Dawn asked Zombie what they should do now. Zombie, observing Varmint, thought that intervening might expose him. He turned to Dawn and told her to go down and defeat Varmint. Dawn protested, saying that if the president of the Steel Blade Department couldn't win, going down there would just be like offering herself up on a plate. Zombie ignored her complaint and instead bit her arm. Afterward, Dawn was bewildered, asking if she was going to turn into a zombie now. Then she covered her chest with both hands and angrily asked if Zombie had any inappropriate thoughts toward her. Zombie quickly denied it. He told her to remember to hold back a little when she struck Varmint. Zombie had used his powerful zombie virus to totally reconfigure and upgrade Dawn's genes. In an instant, Dawn powered up. Just as Varmint was about to finish off the president of the Steel Blade Department, Dawn approached, dragging her Gatling gun behind her, and challenged Varmint to come play with her. Varmint turned around and asked who she thought she was. She calmly stepped forward and called him a braggart, asking what made him so special. After saying this, Dawn immediately pulled out her specialized Gatling gun. In an instant, countless bullets zipped toward Varmint. Varmint, but to her surprise, Varmint was just casually dodging everything. However, the president of the Steel Blade department behind him was in bad shape. Fortunately, all the bullets managed to just barely miss him. The vice president quickly grabbed the president and got them both out of the battle zone. Just then, Dawn appeared right above Varmint and performed a 360-degree leap into the air. As she flew over his head, she quickly pulled the pins from 2 high-explosive grenades. Dawn forcefully stuffed the 2 grenades into Varmint's mouth. With a thunderous explosion, Varmint was instantly engulfed in flames. But as the thick smoke cleared, Varmint walked out as if nothing had happened, asking if she was trying to tickle him, as it didn't hurt at all. But before he could finish his sentence, he was shot in the face with buckshot. Dawn, with a mischievous smile, was back on top of the building. The vice president asked Zombie what he had done to her. Zombie replied that it wasn't much, just a slight modification to her genes, and that this was only the beginning stage. He could make her even stronger. The focus shifted back to Varmint. Although he was immortal, facing such intense attacks still made him feel the pain. At that moment, Dawn suddenly laughed uproariously, as if her body had evolved. Seeing this, the president of the Steel Blade department was completely terrified, now only wanting to hurry home to his mother. Suddenly, Varmint took the initiative and charged at Dawn, but he missed, and instead, Dawn stomped him into the ground. With a bang, Dawn delivered a sweeping kick to Varmint's face. The powerful blow sent him flying and tumbling backward. Dawn picked up a rocket launcher and yelled, asking if he wasn't immortal, and telling him to try this out. At that moment, Varmint, who was looking quite beaten up, saw some gasoline nearby. He quickly grabbed the barrel and started chugging it down. At the same time, Dawn's rocket fired toward him. But in a flash, the rocket was split in 2. It turned out that Varmint, having fueled up on gasoline, had somehow increased his strength. Varmint then sliced Dawn in half with his quick move. Seeing this, the president and vice president of the Steel Blade department exclaimed in despair, saying it was over, and they were definitely done for this time. Varmint smugly reminded them that he was immortal and told them to stop wasting their energy. However, Zombie on the rooftop suddenly clenched his fist. The next second, Dawn's sliced body miraculously started to heal. This change shocked Varmint. He hadn't expected Dawn to also have regeneration. Seeing this, the president and vice president from the Steel Blade department just wanted to hurry home to their mothers. Meanwhile, the 2 in the arena were only getting more energized as they fought. Dawn, with a mischievous smile, roared that Varmint wasn't bad and that they should keep playing. Hearing this, Varmint was also confused, asking who the real Zombie was. At this moment, Zombie, standing on the rooftop, hadn't expected Dawn's potential to be so great after her genetic change. However, at this point, her body had been badly hurt, and the pain from being sliced in half was real. So the fight needed to end quickly. Zombie decided to intervene, saying that since Varmint couldn't stay home and behave, he shouldn't blame Zombie for having to discipline him. With Zombie's deliberate control, Dawn's potential was activated again. In just an instant, she was right in front of Varmint. Dawn punched Varmint in the face, sending him flying high into the air. Just then, Dawn ran up a building, got behind Varmint, and fiercely smashed the back of her Gatling gun onto his head. With a loud crash, as the dust settled, Varmint was just climbing out of the pit when he saw Dawn standing in front of him again. What followed was a series of powerful slams and blows, during which Varmint couldn't fight back at all. Just as Dawn was about to launch another combo, Varmint quickly raised his hand to surrender, saying he would go home immediately and never come out again. Hearing this, Zombie could only look on in silence, while the green-haired subordinate watching in the control room was also stunned. Suddenly, Dawn put down her machine gun, and her powered-up state instantly vanished, ending her transformation. At that moment, Varmint, hiding in the pit, noticed her change and immediately jumped out, landing a sneak punch on Dawn's face. Seeing this, Zombie cursed, asking Dawn what she was doing and why she believed Varmint's nonsense. He pointed out that the moment she let her guard down, she reverted back to normal. Dawn looked regretful. She hadn't expected her powered-up state to disappear so easily. Varmint taunted her, saying it was just stimulants, and now that the drug was gone, he'd see how she was going to pass away. Zombie was speechless, realizing he might have to intervene himself. Meanwhile, the green-haired subordinate, watching from the shadows, was thrilled, saying this Zombie was too powerful and even played dirty. He excitedly worked the keyboard, hoping to see Varmint finish them all. As Varmint was closing in, just about to eliminate Dawn and the others, the green-haired subordinate suddenly noticed another person appearing on the street. Watching Zombie slowly approach, Varmint immediately stopped what he was doing. Just when the green-haired subordinate thought another great show was about to start, Varmint suddenly found himself unable to speak. At that moment, Zombie gave him a stern look and asked him what he was doing there, reminding that he had told him to stay home. This statement made everyone nearby pause, and at that moment, in the control room, the green-haired subordinate was also shocked, because no matter how hard he tried to take control, Varmint showed no reaction. It turned out that with Zombie's appearance, Varmint's consciousness was instantly sent back hundreds of years ago to their first meeting, when he thought Zombie was just a little zombie. The scene returned to the present, and Dawn and the others were in disbelief because the once arrogant Varmint was now so terrified that he had wet his pants. Seeing this, the green-haired subordinate was incredulous and frantically pressed buttons on the control panel, trying to regain control of Varmint. But watching Zombie approach step by step, Varmint was so scared he dared not even breathe. In a daze, Varmint remembered that summer hundreds of years ago. Back then, he was known as Lord Chainsaw, ruling his territory, until that guy who called himself Zombie appeared. Initially, Varmint thought he was just an ordinary little zombie, but the next second, Zombie, in his second form, grabbed his mouth and declared that from now on, Varmint was his subordinate. Zombie asked if he had any objections, and Varmint quickly nodded in agreement. The scene returned to the present, and Varmint didn't dare to move. The green-haired subordinate was furious and yelled that Varmint was immortal and asked what he was afraid of, but what he didn't know was that Varmint had been disobedient in the past. As a result, Zombie had torn him into pieces and hung him on a tree like dried meat for hundreds of years. So now, no matter how the green-haired subordinate tried to control Varmint, Varmint's body instinctively resisted. At that moment, the zombie control computer exploded under the green-haired subordinate's frantic button pressing, and Varmint, out of pure fear, immediately ran away. The green-haired subordinate was stunned, and the trio watching the show was also dumbfounded. As for Zombie himself, he was completely baffled. Watching his plan fail because of Zombie, the green-haired subordinate was furious. Just as he was about to try something else, Professor Jaime's hand suddenly landed on his shoulder. He told him to forget about it, as they were about to come down. As he spoke, several armed helicopters appeared high in the sky. It turned out that the two department presidents of the Beyonders Academy and others had arrived. He asked the green-haired subordinate if Professor Jaime was down there. The subordinate confirmed that they were 6 floors underground, and the total area was about 10,000 square meters. Questioned how they were supposed to find them in such a huge underground area. However, before she could finish speaking, the chief of the Stainless Steel Academy drew his sword and declared that problems could be solved with overwhelming force. With that, he jumped out of the helicopter, called him a brute. The Stainless Steel Academy's chief didn't back down but advanced, causing a sonic boom. He swung his long sword casually from side to side, and the next second, he spiraled violently toward the ground like a steel tornado. Soon after, a loud explosion came from the ground. The Stainless Steel Academy's chief had smashed a crater 100 meters deep into the earth. Zhang Lanqi was speechless, thinking he was too reckless. She worried that making such a big scene might set off a trap below. However, back at the helicopter, the chief of the Beyonders Academy looked unconcerned, claiming that all traps were useless against absolute power. He then leaped down from the helicopter. As all the armed forces entered the underground city, they searched for a long time, but didn't find anyone. This puzzled the two academy chiefs, who wondered if Professor Jaime had escaped. Meanwhile, above ground, Zhang Lanqi couldn't help but complain, asking why they had to guard up there while the others rushed underground to capture people. Zhang Lanqi's subordinate quickly offered a justification, saying they were their superiors. At this moment, the scene shifted to the top of a high-rise building. All of Professor Jaime's men had already relocated there. Professor Jaime declared it was time to show them his great experiment and ordered them to execute Plan A. Meanwhile, in the underground city, the Stainless Steel Academy's chief approached a cylindrical incubator. Driven by curiosity, he tore off the label, which read, "Contains the Zombie King. Open it if you are a man." Seeing such words, the Stainless Steel Academy's chief immediately ordered his subordinates to blow up the incubator, advised caution, saying their main objective was to capture people, and they shouldn't create unnecessary complications. Seeing that they hadn't been tricked, the green-haired subordinate quickly reported to Professor Jaime that they had chickened out. Hearing this, Professor Jaime calmly pulled a detonator from his pocket. As he pressed the button, a remote-controlled bomb hidden behind the incubator was triggered. Hearing the sound of the bomb, the chief felt that something was very wrong, but it was already too late to escape. A violent explosion suddenly erupted, engulfing all the soldiers in flames. However, that level of explosion was merely a tickle to the Stainless Steel Academy's chief. But when Professor Jaime learned that the creature from the incubator had emerged, he burst into maniacal laughter. He declared that the destruction of humanity started today and ordered his greatest experiment to go slaughter all humans, even including him. The scene jumped back to the underground city. As the smoke slowly cleared, the two academy chiefs looked completely baffled. The so-called Zombie King mentioned on the label turned out to be just a baby zombie with a pacifier still in its mouth. The two chiefs stared blankly. Just as the Stainless Steel Academy's chief moved forward to check, the Beyonders Academy chief held his shoulder and cautioned him to be careful, noting that the more harmless something looked, the more dangerous it usually was. However, the Stainless Steel Academy's chief didn't care and charged forward, swinging his sword, but the seemingly infantile zombie dodged with an eerily agile move, suddenly appearing on top of the attacker's head. Seeing this, the chief couldn't help but exclaim that he knew it. He shouted for everyone to retreat now, or they would all perish. As he spoke, all the soldiers quickly ran outside. However, the stubborn Stainless Steel Academy chief, with a look of disdain, didn't believe a small zombie could cause much trouble. He slashed at the zombie again with his sword. Seeing the zombie split in half by his blade, he thought it was over. But the next second, the small zombie split into two separate entities. The Stainless Steel Academy chief was dumbfounded, asking what kind of monster this was. At that moment, the two separate zombie entities began speaking in a strange language and then eerily fused back together. Meanwhile, the real Professor Jaime had already escaped to the rooftop of a different building. He ordered his subordinate to release the zombies so they could escape during the chaos. Immediately, he released all the zombies in the city. In an instant, hordes of zombies rushed toward Zhang Lanqi and her team. However, Zhang Lanqi was not worried at all. Just as her subordinate was about to call for backup, Zhang Lanqi stepped forward and told him there was no need. She walked forward, took the hair tie from her hair, and with a quick flick, it transformed into a sharp sword. With her sword in hand, Zhang Lanqi moved with the grace of a female warrior. In a flash, she kicked a zombie right in the face. There were numerous thudding sounds as all the zombies on the street were kicked high into the air by her. Using a large tree as a catapult, Zhang Lanqi soared into the air. Her subordinate was astonished. In the air, Zhang Lanqi executed her swordplay at high speed. In just a few breaths, she landed, and all the zombies in the air were cut into pieces. At that moment, her subordinate, who was eating lunch, was stunned because his plate had somehow ended up with top-tier zombie sushi on it. Zhang Lanqi crossed her arms and stated that this number of zombies wasn't even enough for a warm-up. Meanwhile, the green-haired subordinate on the rooftop was furious. He hadn't expected the zombies he had just released to be cleaned up by her so quickly. He wished that chainsaw zombie was still around to give this troublesome woman some trouble. He directed other zombies to rush toward Zhang Lanqi, but just then two strange figures appeared in the alley. It was Gu and Blackie, who had also arrived. Blackie stepped forward, pulling a zombie along, and asked if they had seen the zombie in the picture, the one with the chainsaw. But before he could finish, the zombie he was holding rudely slapped the paper away. Blackie was speechless, saying that foreign zombies were so rude. Gu stepped forward, worried that if they couldn't find Varmint, the king would punish them too. Blackie broke out in a cold sweat, but insisted they would find him. Meanwhile, inside the underground city, the pacifier-sucking zombie stretched out its hand and invited them to come play. The two academy chiefs were left speechless. The stainless steel academy chief was the quicker one, drawing his sword and slashing at the zombie. But the zombie dodged everything. At that moment, the stainless steel academy chief gathered his strength and, with a powerful slash, cut the zombie into two pieces. However, the bisected zombie acted as if nothing had happened, bounced a few times, and then reconnected. This made the stainless steel academy chief furious, demanding that if the zombie had guts, it shouldn't run and should fight him fairly. After hearing this, the zombie suddenly pulled out its pacifier. Something bizarre happened. The once less than a meter tall little zombie transformed into a tall and beautiful female zombie. Seeing this, the two academy chiefs were dumbfounded, asking what the heck this was. The stainless steel academy chief asked if she was ready and fiercely slashed at the female zombie with his katana. But the next second, he was dumbfounded because his powerful strike was effortlessly caught by her with just 2 fingers. Furthermore, no matter how much force he used, the steel blade couldn't move even a fraction of an inch further. Seeing this, the stainless steel academy chief realized he was probably no match for her and immediately turned around, yelling at the chief to come over and help. Hearing this, the chief joined the fight in his Model 1 armor. But before he could make a move, the female zombie kneed him in the face, blasting him up and away. The terrifying force not only tore through a large building, but also, by a strange coincidence, landed him right in front of Blackie and Gu. Seeing the human suddenly appear, they wondered if they should rescue him, but Blackie immediately asked if Gu was crazy, reminding him they were zombies. Just then, another earth-shattering crash echoed from the direction of the underground facility. Soon after, the stainless steel academy chief was sent flying back like a cannonball, crashing through multiple buildings. Seeing this, Violet and Zhang Lanqi hurried forward and asked what had happened in the underground facility. Grimacing in pain, the stainless steel academy chief raised his hand and pointed behind them, telling them to see for themselves. Hearing this, the two quickly turned around, but when they clearly saw who it was, their faces showed sheer astonishment. It was all because the beautiful zombie was leisurely leaning on the railing, yawning. Seeing this bizarre scene, Violet immediately felt that this zombie was definitely not ordinary. Beside her, Zhang Lanqi quickly drew her sword, proposing they work together and not let her escape. But faced with the intimidating presence of the two presidents, the beautiful zombie wasn't panicked at all. She even beckoned them forward with an intriguing hand motion. Meanwhile, Zombie and his group were leisurely grilling skewers. The Steel Blade Department president held up a cup of tea, offering it to Zombie. Zombie commented that the tea was dry, and the Steel Blade Department president was outraged at whoever made the tea. Just then, a rumbling noise suddenly came from down the street, and Zombie immediately stood up, suggesting they go over and see what happened. Zhang Lanqi made the first move, fiercely throwing her sword at the female zombie. With a whoosh, it only made a small cut on the female zombie's face. Violet quickly drew her sword and charged forward, but in the next second, the female zombie kicked her in the chin, the intense pain nearly knocking Violet out. The female zombie commented that Violet's speed was decent. Hearing this, Violet couldn't stand it anymore. She performed a 360-degree spin in mid-air and then forcefully kicked the female zombie in the head. Despite such a fierce attack, the female zombie remained unaffected and only said, "But sadly." Seeing this, Violet felt uneasy and quickly dashed backward. As she retreated, Zhang Lanqi, wielding her sword, charged forward. Countless sword slashes swirled around the female zombie, cutting nearby buildings into numerous pieces. On the other side, the Stainless Steel Academy chief, enduring the pain, found a secluded spot. He quickly took off his pants and then pressed a button on his neck. The next second, a series of mechanical sounds clicked into action. In no time, the Stainless Steel Academy chief had transformed into a steel-armored knight. This was the secret weapon of the Stainless Steel Academy, the Heart of Steel Mark I. Back to Zhang Lanqi and her group, the battle was fiercely back and forth. Just as Violet and Zhang Lanqi were preparing to launch a final assault on the female zombie, she suddenly extended an unusually long tongue and underwent a series of grotesque mutations. Seeing this, Zhang Lanqi and Violet were utterly shocked, asking what the heck this was. The female zombie slammed her palm onto the ground, sending a powerful shockwave that blasted them away. The once shapely female zombie had now transformed into an overly muscular mutant with 8-pack abs. Fortunately, the transformed Stainless Steel Academy chief finally arrived, warning them that they were no match for her. However, the overconfident Stainless Steel Academy chief didn't heed their warnings. Instead, he boldly approached the mutated strongman, proposing they decide this in one hit. With that, the Stainless Steel Academy chief and the strongman zombie both threw their punches. As their fists met, a powerful shockwave blasted Zhang Lanqi and Violet away. The massive explosion also caught the attention of zombie nearby. Soon, as the smoke cleared, the Stainless Steel Academy chief was left with only half his frame intact. In contrast, the strongman zombie was completely unharmed. He declared that the chief had already lost. What the zombie didn't know was that zombie was already close by. The new zombie king initiated its third transformation due to the opponent's resilience. Unexpectedly, what was once a tiny suckling zombie had now become the true zombie king. Facing such a formidable foe, Zhang Lanqi and her companions never gave up, but against such overwhelming power, their efforts were in vain. The zombie king merely lifted a hand casually, and the Stainless Steel Academy chief's mech instantly fell apart. Zhang Lanqi and Violet were also blasted hundreds of meters into the air. Unexpectedly, the two landed right in front of Zombie, close enough for him to catch them both. Zombie and his party rushed over to express their concern for the two who had been fighting. Violet then warned Zombie that they should leave, as they were facing the Zombie King. However, before they could even react, the Zombie King issued an order to its horde: "Go on, eat them." As the words fell, countless zombies rushed toward Zhang Lanqi and her companions. Seeing this, Zombie became furious, and, after throwing the two on the ground, shouted, "Scram!" All the zombies stopped in their tracks, now wary of Zombie. At this moment, the Zombie King asked in confusion who Zombie was. Zombie slowly walked into the crowd of zombies and asked the king what he should be called if the king called himself the Zombie King. As soon as Zombie finished speaking, all the zombies knelt down before him. Before long, all the zombies were at Zombie's feet. Zombie asked why the king wasn't talking anymore. The Zombie King smirked, realizing Zombie was one of their kind. He suggested the survivor be called King. With that, he threw a powerful punch at Zombie's face. But such a terrifying punch was mocked by Zombie, who asked if he hadn't eaten. Enraged by these words, the Zombie King was about to react when Zombie's fist brutally landed on his solar plexus. In an instant, the formidable force blasted the Zombie King flying tens of kilometers away, eventually crashing onto an aircraft carrier at sea with a thunderous boom. At this moment, Professor Jaime, who was watching from the rooftop, was stunned, asking how such a terrifying creature had suddenly appeared. On the other side, the Zombie King laughed, saying it was interesting and that he had finally found someone worth fighting. After speaking, he plunged into the sea and then lifted a submarine weighing tens of thousands of tons into the sky. The Zombie King used the submarine as a weapon and slammed it down onto Zombie with a big crash. Meanwhile, on a rooftop, Blackie was giving the chief emergency medical attention. Just then, Blackie said he sensed the king's presence over there. A figure suddenly shot up from within the submarine. Zombie flew into the sky and then flung a rope around the Zombie King's neck, yanking it fiercely toward him. The next second, Zombie brutally kicked him in the face. The terrifying force caved the Zombie King's face in. The Zombie King was thoroughly enraged. He rushed to the ground, lifted the submarine again, and swung it violently at Zombie. With a thunderous boom, Zombie was blasted thousands of kilometers away onto an aircraft carrier. Zombie mocked him, asking if he liked throwing things around. Meanwhile, seeing the Zombie King's formidable power, the chief urgently suggested they evacuate immediately, warning that the thing Professor Jaime had developed was not something Zombie could handle. But before he could finish, Blackie smirked dismissively, telling the chief to watch carefully, as there was no one in this world who could defeat their king, not even the gods. Back on the aircraft carrier, Zombie suddenly flashed, and the next second, he was already in front of the Zombie King. The king was shocked at how much faster he had gotten. Zombie's fist fiercely smashed into his face. The terrifying force directly sent the Zombie King flying off the earth. However, before the Zombie King could catch his breath, an aircraft carrier was launched right into him. With a loud boom, the Zombie King was fiercely smashed into the moon. Dawn and the others were completely stunned. However, at that moment, the zombie king on the moon kicked the aircraft carrier with great force and simultaneously propelled himself back to Earth. The aircraft carrier and the zombie king, filled with rage, were heading right toward Zombie. Seeing this, Zombie immediately jumped, rushing toward the zombie king mid-flight. But at this moment, the zombie king suddenly entered the aircraft carrier's main inner deck and began to damage the nuclear reactor. Just as Zombie arrived at the aircraft carrier, a huge explosion instantly spread across the continent's sky. Seeing this, Dawn and the others screamed for help. However, as the mushroom cloud slowly dissipated in the sky, Zombie landed perfectly unharmed on a battleship. The zombie king landed roughly on a different ship across the water. Zombie said that the damage wasn't even enough to tickle him. Hearing this, the zombie king was completely speechless and began to gather all his strength. Next, his arms quickly lengthened and struck toward Zombie. In just an instant, Zombie was smashed onto a high-rise building back in the city. The zombie king proposed that since neither of them could defeat the other, they should cooperate and destroy the world together. Meanwhile, the chief was fearfully watching with Blackie and Agu, suggesting they run, as he knew Zombie was very strong after transforming, but continuing to fight like this was no solution. However, before he could finish speaking, Blackie interrupted, asking who said their king could only transform once. Hearing this, the chief was shocked, as he hadn't expected Zombie to have a third form. The scene shifted back to Zombie, who stood up from the rubble and said he wasn't interested in destroying the world or anything of the sort. He added that only weaklings thought about destroying the world every day. The zombie king was speechless upon hearing Zombie's insult, but then Zombie transformed again. His originally dull skin slowly began to peel off, and with a roar, Zombie turned into a fair-skinned young man. Everyone was shocked, asking what he had just done. Meanwhile, Agao slapped the chief's face hard, telling him to look and see their king's true power. When the chief saw the fair-skinned young man on the high-rise, he was utterly incredulous. Many commented on his new transformation, noting that he looked completely different from his opponent, that he looked human, and that he was even stronger than before. Just then, it began to rain around them. Seeing Zombie's transformation, the zombie king was bewildered, asking if he was a human or a zombie. It charged forward, but just as its fist was about to hit Zombie's face, the space around them suddenly changed. The raindrops that had been falling seemed to stop mid-air. At that moment, Zombie casually raised his hand. The next second, the zombie king's body was instantly split into pieces, and the raindrops reversed back. Not only that, even Violet and the others began floating in the air, and even various fish in the sea were affected, as if gravity had been reversed. At this point, only half of the zombie king's body remained, showing a face of fear. He had not expected such a huge gap between himself and Zombie. Zombie simply stated, "I am your daddy." Just then, a giant cyclone appeared in the sky. Dawn looked on in disbelief at this scene. Meanwhile, Violet and Zhang Lanqi also fell from the sky as Zombie's spell ended and the gravity around them returned to normal. Violet was dumbfounded, wondering if this was still the power of a mere zombie. Suddenly, a 100-ton whale heavily fell onto a high-rise building. Seeing this, Professor Jaime was also shocked. It was his first time seeing such a zombie. The divided zombie king still refused to admit defeat. He leaped up from the ground and loudly shouted, "Regeneration!" His separated body began to reassemble. He claimed that, as the zombie king, he was an unkillable life form and that Zombie couldn't do anything to him. Zombie raised his hand again, and with a swipe, he pulled the zombie king to him with an imperceptible force. He then grabbed the zombie king by the neck and looked at him with disdain, saying the king misunderstood death and asking if he thought one needed to be physically destroyed to perish. Hearing this, the zombie king was visibly stunned. Before he could argue the next second, he saw Zombie's terrifying eyes. Instantly, the king's consciousness was transported to a strange environment. At this moment, numerous giant spaceships appeared above Earth, and on one of the main ships, a humanoid in mech armor commanded countless mech warriors to advance toward Earth. The person standing in the way of these ancient ones was Zombie, but in a form that had yet to be seen. The humanoid commander stated, "Of the 6 times human civilization has ended, this will be the last." The ancient ones were waging war against Zombie, so that he would no longer destroy humanity one more time. The next second, all their spaceships were instantly engulfed in flames. Zombie had wreaked havoc on the fleet in space. The scene returned to the present, where the zombie king was in agony. After a while, there was no more movement from the zombie king in Zombie's hand. Meanwhile, Violet and the others watching from afar still did not know what had happened. They only saw that after Zombie grabbed the zombie king by the neck, he instantly stopped moving. At that moment, Zombie suddenly loosened his grip, and the zombie king fell straight from the rooftop. After a loud bang, the zombie king was left unconscious. Seeing this, the chief was in utter disbelief, thinking the king must have been scared into losing consciousness by His Majesty's third form. Meanwhile, Professor Jaime hadn't expected the zombie king he had so diligently researched to be scared to death just like that. His subordinate urged him that they better run now, or it would be too late. But before he could finish speaking, Zombie had already arrived by their side. Professor Jaime asked how Zombie knew they were there, as they had never shown themselves before. Seeing Zombie's displeased face, the green-haired subordinate was immediately scared into paralysis on the ground. Zombie asked if they were going to surrender, or if they wanted to go down and see the Zombie King. The group immediately raised their hands to surrender. Although Professor Jaime was reluctant, at this moment, he could only grit his teeth and give up resistance. And so, the harmful Professor Jaime was finally captured by the Beyonders Academy. After everything was settled, Dawn and Violet saw Zombie squatting there, lost in thought. It turned out that Zombie had reverted to his original form. Violet asked Dawn to go over and talk to him, even promising her the position of vice president if she succeeded. Violet ushered her forward, and Dawn reluctantly approached. With no choice left, Dawn steeled herself and greeted Zombie. Just then, Zombie suddenly stood up, which startled Dawn. However, Zombie simply stated that he still wanted an indestructible piece of clothing. Relieved, Dawn finally relaxed, as Zombie seemed completely harmless now. She asked if he remembered what just happened. He replied that his memory of it was a bit fuzzy, but he knew he had probably defeated many weirdos like that before. The scene shifted to a prisoner transport convoy containing Professor Jaime and his subordinate. Professor Jaime muttered that he had to acquire Zombie's genes to create a being even more powerful than him. Zombie's wish had finally come true, providing not only a peaceful and happy life for his people, but also a human military escort. It turned out that ever since Professor Jaime had been captured by Zombie, the humans had appointed him as a president of a society and granted him the authority to manage a city. However, Zombie requested to take over the city of H. The humans were confused, asking what good that godforsaken barren land was. Zombie insisted on his choice and promised to manage H City well. Thus, Zombie not only became a president, but was also appointed to manage H City. The Beyonders Academy was furious upon hearing this news. Violet also had a headache, unable to understand what Zombie was thinking. Apparently, Zombie wanted H City because it still housed thousands of citizens. To expedite their relocation, Zombie had the society's military provide protection along the streets. At that moment, from a high-rise, Zombie watched his citizens with satisfaction. Blackie approached and reported that, according to Zombie's orders, all the citizens had been relocated. Now they finally had a home. The human legions began to drill in the city. A zombie child asked his mother if the soldiers were going to shoot them with those fiery weapons. The mother replied that they were citizens under President Zombie, and from now on, the soldiers were sworn to protect them. The soldiers wondered if these people were crazy or something. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Zombie's underlings were also thrilled, never expecting that they would have their own city. Zombie reflected that sometimes the continuity of a race didn't necessarily have to rely on war. After saying this, he left the rooftop without looking back. Blackie asked if Varmint had been hanging for a few months now. Zombie waved his hand and told them to just let him keep hanging. Poor Varmint, hanging on the city hall building, said with a pitiful face that he was wrong, wouldn't dare again, and was almost dried up into a mummy. He pleaded with his king to let him down, promising he wouldn't do it again. Dawn and Violet were having a sparring match to test out Dawn's new capabilities. Violet did not expect that the mutated Dawn would have such incredibly high combat power, with just a simple clash causing her serious internal injuries. Dawn apologized, saying she hadn't even used her full strength yet. Hearing this, Violet could no longer bear it and instantly teleported behind Dawn, but just then, Dawn's head suddenly made a 180-degree spin, startling Violet, who was about to make a sneak attack. Immediately, Violet hastily did a back handstand, supporting herself with her hands on the ground, and asked if Dawn was still human. However, she hadn't finished speaking when Dawn already turned around, raising her Gatling gun. Seeing this, Violet quickly retreated. The rattling sound of the Gatling gun followed. Dawn was laughing maniacally and asked if she could also take the position of president now. Hearing this, Violet was instantly enraged. She pushed off with her feet, rushing toward Dawn like a bullet. With a forceful slash of her blade, Dawn's Gatling gun instantly became scrap metal. Dawn taunted her, asking if that was all she had, but before she could finish, Violet had already sliced her in two. But Violet was shocked, asking why she didn't dodge. However, the Dawn that had been split in half was not scared, but instead laughed out loud. Then, a bizarre scene occurred, as the body that had been cleaved in two began to slowly regenerate. Before long, Dawn stood up as if nothing had happened. Violet wondered what on earth Zombie had done to Dawn. Dawn asked how she looked, and if being president shouldn't be a problem with her current strength. After saying that, she suddenly threw a punch at Violet. With a boom, Violet was instantly slammed against the wall, losing her ability to fight. Seeing Violet defeated, Dawn asked if she was okay, and if she went too hard just now. Violet asked if she turned into a zombie after Zombie bit her, reminding Dawn they checked in the lab yesterday, and all her cells were perfectly normal. Violet questioned what was with the 360-degree head turn and her body's regenerative abilities. Dawn explained that she could fully control her transformations, and when she was feeling down, she could inject a stimulant to enhance it without any side effects. Violet paused, deep in thought. Then she rushed out of the arena. After witnessing Dawn's transformation abilities, Violet immediately flew to H City non-stop. At that moment, inside the city hall, Zombie was assigning tasks to his underlings. The first was the financial authority of H City, and Zombie thought of Blackie first. From today, you are the director of the treasury. As soon as he finished speaking, the door of the meeting room was was suddenly banged open. Seeing the breathless Violet, Zombie was happy to see her, asking what brought her here. However, before he could finish, Violet rushed over. Just as Zombie looked bewildered, Violet suddenly opened his mouth and forcefully made Zombie bite her. Violet then abruptly left the meeting hall without looking back. She had just left the city hall when her assistant hurriedly came up to remind her that she was too reckless and asked if she had forgotten that Zombie could control people's minds. The assistant worried about Zombie making her do something unspeakable. However, Violet not only did not regret her actions, but replied that to possess such power, she was fine even if he made her sing and dance to rap. Meanwhile, Zombie was still bewildered. Nevertheless, under his meticulous planning, H City was finally on the right track. While the citizens were living and working in peace and contentment, they also developed various shops, such as a hair salon run by zombies, a zombie real estate company, and even a zombie driving school. However, getting a driver's license was still a bit difficult for zombies. At this moment, Zombie looked at his city with a sense of relief. His dream of many years had finally come true. But what he didn't know was that a bigger crisis was quietly approaching. A one-eyed woman was studying Zombie's information. She said she didn't understand why the Beyonders Academy would choose someone like him as president. Her colleague mentioned hearing that this zombie was actually a zombie. She dismissed it, saying they had seen them slander each other in their academies before, and although she didn't believe they would let a zombie be president, she really didn't like this zombie. She concluded they would know what this zombie was all about once they went to H City. Over an iceberg in the North Pole, a helicopter rattled through. Moreover, humans also sent a giant industrial ship. Soon, the expedition team arrived at their destination. Someone mentioned hearing that an ancient body was suspected to have been found there, buried under 500 meters of ice. They hoped that if they could extract her completely, it would truly be a great discovery. With the help of the crane, the body was soon lifted up. As an archaeologist, Professor Strange said it was also his first time discovering such an existence. As the crane slowly pulled the ice block from the ground, a faintly visible body finally emerged in front of everyone. From the appearance, it seemed to be a young girl. Just as Professor Strange was shocked by this discovery, his assistant next to him was suddenly muffled by someone, who then bit his neck. Seeing this, the professor was startled, but before he could react, he was knocked down by another person. It turned out that the attackers were a mysterious organization, and their target was the body encased in ice. The leader of the group used an ice pick to break the ice block. The previously desiccated body now seemed to regain its vitality. Seeing this, a vampire nearby quickly draped his coat over her. They knelt before the woman, proclaiming, "All hail the Blood Queen. May our forever queen remain eternally youthful." The Blood Queen asked if that fool named Zombie was still alive. Her subordinate replied that Zombie was not only still alive, but also thriving, and he was mixing with humans again after destroying the last human civilization. The Blood Queen mused that she might be lonely if Zombie weren't around, and stated that this time she definitely wouldn't lose to him again. Zombie had been leisurely drinking tea in H City when he was suddenly summoned urgently to the Academy's headquarters by Violet. This was because a strange incident had occurred at the headquarters. A member of the exploration team in the North Pole had suddenly mutated and killed all the team members. Seeing this scene, Violet and Zhang Lanqi were also baffled. This guy didn't seem like a zombie. With no other options, they had to find Zombie, their so-called professional. Soon, Zombie arrived at the headquarters, but just as he entered, he was startled by the sight before him, because not a single person there was normal. President Ying of the Iron Club Academy introduced himself and noted that Zombie was the one who captured Professor Jaime. Upon hearing this, Zombie immediately stepped forward to shake his hand, affirming that was correct. But just as they had parted, President Ying sneered that Professor Jaime was just a small fry and not worth his effort. But just when the other presidents thought Zombie was weak, the Stainless Steel Academy chief alone hid in a corner, wishing he had stayed home. The scene shifted back to Zombie, who by now had arrived at the laboratory. However, when it came to identifying species, Zombie was clearly unsure. But when he saw the two holes on the person's neck, long-sealed memories suddenly surged forth. Violet asked if he noticed anything. Just then, the research scientist suddenly let out a scream. But when he saw Zombie's face, he immediately became docile. It turned out that Zombie had already switched to his second form. Zombie found it interesting that it was the Blood Tribe. A terrifying aura began to burst from around him. In an instant, Zhang Lanqi and the others were all blown away. Zombie wondered how this species was still around, as he thought they were extinct. His terrifying aura blasted many presidents away, particularly the Iron Club president, who was quite shaken. While everyone was still baffled, Zombie suddenly laughed, finding it interesting, as he thought he had exterminated the vampires 1,000 years ago. He grabbed the researcher and demanded to know where that little red who likes to poison me was now. But having just turned into a vampire, the researcher had no idea of the whereabouts of the Blood Queen. Unable to get the information he wanted, Zombie reverted to his original form. At this moment, inside the hall, the Iron Club president still didn't believe that the recent chaos was caused by Zombie. Only the Stainless Steel chief hiding on the side regretted not staying home. Just then, Zombie finally walked out of the room. Seeing this, Violet Violet and the others quickly approached, asking if he had found anything special. Zombie told them it was best if they were all more careful these next few days. Having said that, he began to furrow his brow and stood motionless. Seeing this, Violet and Dawn felt something was amiss, but the next second, Zombie scratched his head, saying he had already forgotten what happened just now. Meanwhile, next to a large villa on the other side, in a small alley covered with cobwebs, the current Blood Queen looked utterly speechless. Just then, a coin suddenly clinked to the ground beside them. It turned out that a local had thought they were beggars and generously gave them $1. Seeing this, the male vampire, Lanling, immediately lit up and picked up the money. The Blood Queen asked why they had woken her up if they had all ended up like this. Before she could finish speaking, the girl beside her burst into tears, explaining that after the Queen's great battle with Zombie and subsequent loss, vampires no longer had a place to stand. They had to play dead to escape his clutches, and from that moment, they started to hide from both humans and zombies, never leaving this alley all this time. Upon hearing this, the Blood Queen instantly became furious, shocked that the vampires had ended up in such a dire state. She admitted that even summoning her was useless, as she simply couldn't defeat Zombie in her current state. Her subordinates explained that the reason they woke her was because they had obtained an important piece of information about a special human who might be able to help her defeat Zombie, someone who might bring them hope. Hearing this, the Blood Queen's interest was piqued, and she asked who it was. Lanling then pulled out a wanted poster from his chest. The man was Professor Jaime, the creator of the recent Zombie King. However, at this moment, Professor Jaime was still locked in a prison. Violet asked Zombie why they didn't just deal with Professor Jaime directly. Zombie replied that they couldn't kill him yet, as not only had he planted many undercover agents, but there was also a lot of research data they hadn't found yet. Violet worried about the possibility of Professor Jaime escaping. However, before she could finish, the Iron Club president burst into laughter, declaring it impossible. He then offered to take Zombie to sea, since Zombie was the one who captured him. In no time, they arrived at a deserted valley via helicopter. The Iron Club president explained that Professor Jaime was detained in a prison 3,000 meters underground, and even taking the elevator down would take at least 30 minutes. As for security, he boasted, it went without saying. Not only were there high-tech weapons, but each level was also guarded by a highly skilled president. With such security, even if Professor Jaime had extraordinary abilities, he couldn't escape. Moreover, they had attached a huge detonating cord to him, and if anyone approached him, the detonator would explode immediately. He boasted that even if a god descended, all he could bring back was a corpse. Hearing this, Zombie broke out in a cold sweat, feeling that human methods were too cruel. He then turned around, saying he had other matters to attend to, and left. Meanwhile, in a small alley, when the Blood Queen saw their conversation through a live CCTV footage on a tablet, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. The scene returned to the prison. The Iron Club president taunted Violet, saying her little boyfriend was probably going to be in trouble soon. He mentioned that the stainless steel chief had informed Inspector Chen that President Zombie had even established a city for zombies. Hearing this, Violet was stunned and asked him why he was telling her all this. The Iron Club president said he had no interest in whether Zombie was a zombie or not because in his eyes, only the strong caught his attention. Meanwhile, Zombie was happily strolling around the streets of a human city. In the underground prison, Professor Jaime was pondering something. Just then, a meal delivery staff pushed in the cart. His subordinate worried that they were done for and were going to perish. However, Professor Jaime laughed, determined that he must obtain Zombie's genes. His subordinate asked why he was talking about that when they were about to be executed. Professor Jaime reassured him, saying they wouldn't execute him until they got his research, and that they wouldn't lay a hand on them because he had already hidden the documents in a place no one knew about before he was captured. His subordinate doubted they could create something to defeat Zombie, even with his genes, since Zombie was too powerful. Professor Jaime insisted they needed a strong body to serve as a vessel, then he could create an even more powerful being. His subordinate worried that they were trapped there, just ordinary people, and asked how they could escape. Hearing this, Professor Jaime suddenly fell silent. Soon after, the staff brought in the meal delivery robot. Surprisingly, Professor Jaime didn't resist but cooperated and ate the food delivered by the robot. His subordinate wondered why he was suddenly so obedient. It turned out the meal delivery worker was actually his inside man, and the goal this time was to plant a wiretap in his mouth. Professor Jaime asked where the Zombie King's body was being held. The informant replied that it was kept in a lab on the 200th floor, and there were 2 chiefs guarding that lab, and that from now on, they could proceed according to Professor Jaime's previous plan. Back at the human city where Zombie was having a nice stroll, his phone suddenly started ringing. It was Violet, who had called him right after she got the news. She informed Zombie that because of the stainless steel chief's snitching, Inspector Chen was already on her way to H City. If she found out that what the stainless steel chief said was true, Zombie's days as president were numbered. Hearing this, Zombie instantly broke out in a cold sweat, asking if she would believe him if he said he was a human. Violet hung up after warning him not to think she didn't know what those things in his city were. Zombie was truly panicked. But just then, a nearby cosmetic store suddenly caught his eye. Outside the H-City government building, countless trucks fell from the sky, all makeup supplies Zombie bought from the neighboring city. When Zombie told Blackie about the seriousness of the situation, Blackie immediately had Go notify the leaders of each district to come and pick up the makeup supplies. Soon, the underlings from each district took the trucks back. Blackie admitted he wasn't sure if makeup would really work, but since it was arranged by the king, there must be a reason. In this way, zombies from all regions began to take action. At that time, a zombie mom came with her son to pick up makeup supplies. Her son, watching his mother's strange actions, curiously said he wanted to try. However, when his mother turned around, he was almost scared silly. This wasn't just makeup, it was like changing faces. Soon, all the residents had completed their makeup tasks. Afterwards, when Fur and Lang returned to the office to report back, they were stunned by the sight of the well-made-up faces. They remarked that the transformation was too fast and asked if looking like that would be effective, and what about them? With no other options, Blackie had them temporarily disguised as pets. Oddly, they waited at the airport for a long time, but didn't spot Inspector Chen. As it turned out, Inspector Chen had anticipated that her movements might be leaked, so she took a train to H-City with her subordinates. A colleague asked why Inspector Chen disliked Zombie. Another replied that Inspector Chen despised cowardly and timid people, and except for the department head, she disliked everyone. Inspector Chen then interjected, telling them there was no need to whisper behind her back. She asked if they thought she was biased, and complained that since the department head delegated authority, any Tom or Harry could become a president now. She declared that, in her heart, only someone like the department head could lead humanity to a more prosperous future. Meanwhile, Blackie, completely unaware, was still waiting in vain at the airport, wondering why Inspector Chen hadn't arrived yet. Meanwhile, two of Inspector Chen's subordinates had started surveying the city's residents. One first visited a convenience store, only to find that it sold exclusively egg-based products. When he asked the owner why that was the case, the owner appeared nervous and shook his head vigorously, claiming he could not see nor hear him. The other one then approached a passerby for an interview. However, just then, the person's arm suddenly fell off onto the ground. Seeing this, the investigator was dumbfounded and expressed concern. The person picked up the arm from the ground and fled. Before fleeing, he explained that the arm was just his prosthetic. This left everyone dumbfounded, wondering if there wasn't a single normal person in H-City, and asking if Zombie had actually built a city of lunatics. They decided to record everything as evidence to remove President Zombie. The scene shifted back to the city hall, where Zombie was seen squatting and mumbling unintelligibly. Gao asked what was going on and why the king had turned into this. A soldier reported that President Zombie seemed to have been talking nonsense and trembling ever since he had breakfast. Hearing this, Gao was startled and immediately grabbed the soldier, demanding to know what he fed the king. The soldier, frightened by Gao's action, quickly explained that he had only made a dish of chili stir-fried eggs for President Zombie. Upon hearing this, Gao immediately broke out in a cold sweat. It turned out Zombie couldn't eat chili peppers because they made him abnormally excited, keeping him in his second form, and this state could last for a month. Meanwhile, Blackie, who was still waiting anxiously at the airport, suddenly received a call from Agu. When he learned that the king had accidentally eaten chili peppers, he was horrified, worrying that the king wasn't going to slaughter the inspection team. Blackie frowned, saying if something like that happened, they might not be able to stay in this city anymore. The scene switched back to Inspector Chen and her team, who were still searching for evidence. Just then, a heavy truck suddenly fell from the sky. With a boom, the truck smashed right in front of them. Before they could react, Zombie suddenly descended from the sky and, with another crash, stomped the truck into scrap metal. Seeing this, Inspector Chen and her team were dumbfounded, asking what had just happened. At that moment, Zombie suddenly smiled mischievously and greeted Inspector Chen, offering to give her a tour. At this point, the two assistants were stunned. As the three regained their senses, they looked at Zombie completely confused and asked who he was. Zombie responded with a wicked smile, asking if they had forgotten him so soon, and identifying himself as the very zombie they were looking for. Hearing this, the group was stunned on the spot. The zombie on record wasn't supposed to be like this. At that moment, Zombie jumped down and explained that he had merely taken off his mask. He snapped his fingers and told Inspector Chen that since she had come a long way, he had prepared some gifts for her and asked her to accept them. As soon as he finished speaking, the residents started presenting their specialty stir-fried eggs. They reassured the inspectors that they were law-abiding good citizens and never ate people. After saying this, Zombie picked up Inspector Chen, saying that now that the gifts were received, he would give her a proper tour. With a boom, Zombie jumped up and flew into the sky. In just a moment, they had gotten higher than the clouds. Seeing this, the two assistants were bewildered. Once they regained their senses, they hurriedly stopped a taxi to follow. Zombie slowly fell and landed down onto the tallest building in the city center. He instructed her to take a look, as this was the H-City that he had meticulously built. He boasted that this city was over 2 million square meters in area and still developing. He claimed they had not only listed companies, but had also solved many people's employment issues, and that just in taxes, they could contribute billions each year. Next, he announced he would show her the law and order. As he spoke, Zombie dragged Inspector Chen to the middle of the road. At that moment, a bus driving by couldn't stop in time. Just as it was about to hit Zombie, he kicked the bus's bumper. The bus went flying and became embedded straight into the high-rise. Blackie, who was waiting at the airport, noticed the commotion and quickly dashed to rescue the driver. However, the two assistants who had just arrived were dumbfounded. As for Inspector Chen herself, she was so shocked by Zombie's series of actions that her jaw dropped. Zombie reassured her that the driver wouldn't perish, as every one of his subordinates was extremely skilled and wouldn't let any citizen die. After finishing his speech, he tossed Inspector Chen forward. The two assistants rushed to support her. Zombie told Inspector Chen that he knew why she was there and that he would let her return safely this time. He warned her that no matter what happened next, this city was his and no one could stop him. For a moment, the entire street was eerily quiet. The two assistants suggested they should just go back, saying he looked like trouble, and one added that for a moment, he almost thought Zombie was the department head. Inspector Chen muttered that she would get the head of whoever said Zombie was timid and weak when she got back. Zombie urged them to hurry back while he hadn't changed his mind. Inspector Chen responded that she recognized his ability to manage the city, but that didn't mean he qualified to be the president. She argued that a president needed not only managerial skills, but also sufficient combat capability. She stated that she had seen his city management skills, but she hadn't seen his ability to protect the city. At this, Blackie and the others' faces turned pale. Just as Inspector Chen was about to continue, they rushed up to cover her mouth, but their attempt was in vain. Zombie turned around and asked if Inspector Chen really wanted to see his true strength. Blackie and the others were instantly terrified, muttering that it was all over. Soon after, they all arrived at a nearby beach. Inspector Chen felt a sense of dread. Before she could finish asking why he had brought them there, she saw Zombie's terrifying reflection in the sea. Agu leaned in close to her and warned her that if something happened later, she was on her own. Inspector Chen looked completely baffled. Just then, an assistant noticed the stones around them beginning to float. Shortly after, more and more sand and rocks started rising around Zombie. The next second, Zombie's third form was fully revealed to everyone. The three inspectors were totally shocked. At that moment, Zombie jumped, and the tremendous force sent Inspector Chen tumbling face first into the dirt. By the time they recovered, Zombie had already vanished. Ah Gao pulled out a telescope and handed it to them. Curious, Inspector Chen looked through it, and her face went white with fright. She shockingly saw Zombie looking up at her from a distance of 1.3 billion kilometers away on Saturn. She exclaimed that it was too absurd and wondered if their president was even human. While they were still in shock, Zombie on Saturn began gathering his power. He clenched his right fist and stared fiercely toward Earth. The next second, Zombie violently swung his fist through the air. Ah Gu and the others' faces drastically changed because Zombie's punch had just created a hole through the ocean. Instantly, a tsunami thousands of meters high headed toward the city. Ah Gao quickly positioned himself in front of everyone to protect them. Meanwhile, far away at the headquarters, Dawn and the others felt the tremor. When they saw the massive wave outside the city, they were shocked and immediately activated the Level 1 defense protocol. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't hold back the raging tsunami. Suddenly, another loud sound came from the seaside. It was Zombie jumping back from Saturn. Zombie asked Inspector Chen if she saw his strength now, and if he was qualified enough to protect his citizens. Inspector Chen was completely shocked. Then, Blackie and the others quickly put her into a taxi. It took her a while to recover her senses. She thought that Zombie was simply not human. Watching the taxi slowly drive away, Blackie wondered if the inspectors would try to take back the city. Blackie thought for a moment and decided they wouldn't anymore. Inspector Chen remained in a state of mental confusion. As for H-City, managed by Zombie, it was naturally unharmed. Meanwhile, inside Professor Jaime's prison, several people were discussing a corpse in the laboratory. They were talking about the Zombie King who had been frightened into unconsciousness by Zombie, but what they didn't notice was a researcher nearby secretly mixing something. This researcher was an insider placed in the prison by Professor Jaime. At that moment, he was following Professor Jaime's instructions to prepare an antidote. Professor Jaime knew the Zombie King's body was still there, so injecting this mixture would surely bring it back. Just as the guard was about to go out on patrol, the insider suddenly plunged the syringe into the Zombie King. Seeing this, the guard immediately became upset and slammed the insider against the wall with a loud bang. Before the guard could finish asking what he had done to the body, the Zombie King's eyes suddenly snapped open, followed by a loud, explosive noise. This sound immediately caught the attention of the Iron Club president. He asked what was going on and what had just happened. The alarms throughout the prison also began to sound. The Zombie King, who had been scared into unconsciousness, was now back in action. He commanded the insider to eliminate all the guards and get him out, promising to make him stronger than Zombie. On a civilian plane in the sky, someone suddenly kicked open the cabin door. Then someone inside the plane, holding a projectile device, yelled for nobody to move, assuring them that as long as they obeyed, no one would be harmed. Following the hijacker's orders, the plane flew toward the prison. Just then, the Blood Queen appeared at the cabin door. Her subordinate asked her if they should make a detailed plan, as they had set up a self-destruct mechanism on Professor Jaime. She replied there was no need, saying that human tricks were no challenge for her. She led her followers to leap from 10,000 3,000 meters high. But just as they were nearing the prison entrance, the Iron Club president reacted quickly and organized everyone for defense. But these ordinary tools were utterly useless against the vampires. He tried to rally everyone, saying not to panic, as they still had 30 presidents there, and the intruders couldn't break through. Indeed, as the conflict grew on the top floor, the stainless steel chief and the chief, located on the 500th underground floor, quickly reacted. However, the subordinates were still somewhat lacking when dealing with the Blood Queen. Meanwhile, on the 3000th underground floor, a guard was blown into the wall as the newly awakened Zombie King prepared to leave. But at that moment, Professor Jaime used a communicator to tell him to help him escape, and he could help the Zombie King defeat Zombie. The Zombie King said he wanted to finish both Professor Jaime and Zombie. Professor Jaime chuckled, saying he created the Zombie King, and he could decide if the king lived or perished. The Zombie King was utterly panicked, especially since Professor Jaime had just brought him back to life. Professor Jaime reassured him that he wouldn't let him perish. He just needed help fulfilling his dream, and then he would end his own life right in front of the king. The Zombie King commented that humans were scarier than zombies when they went mad. He then asked what he needed to do. Professor Jaime said it was simple: help him get out, and he promised to make the Zombie King as strong as Zombie. Meanwhile, the 3 major presidents of the prison quickly rushed up. When they saw that the intruder was a woman, they were briefly stunned. They asked who they were and why they had come. The Blood Queen stepped forward and gave them 2 choices: hand over Professor Jaime, and she would leave them unharmed, or else. However, before she could finish, the Iron Club president couldn't hold back and charged at her. Soon after, the chief and the stainless steel chief also took the opportunity to attack from the side. But with a loud boom, the Iron Club president was left with only one arm lying on the ground, and the chief was completely baffled, asking what had just happened. Just then, the guards finally arrived. Facing human weaponry, the Blood Queen showed no intention of dodging. The sound of rapid fire erupted, but the projectiles could not harm the Blood Queen, not even when they hit her eyes. At that moment, one of her subordinates suddenly raised a hand toward the guards, and with a loud boom, all the guards were instantly engulfed in flames. Meanwhile, at the 30th underground level, Professor Jaime had already been rescued. He and the Zombie King were fine, despite the fact that touching the device was supposed to cause it to explode. Professor Jaime explained that there was a 2-second window after the power was cut, and that it was ridiculous to think such a flawed device could hold him. Escorted by the Zombie King, they walked out of the prison. The subordinate worried about making the Zombie King even stronger, since he was already so powerful, fearing something might go wrong. Professor Jaime insisted there was no choice, as there was no better vessel in the world than him. Just as they were preparing to leave, the Zombie King suddenly froze because the guards outside had somehow been wiped out. He asked who did this. Just then, the Blood Queen suddenly descended from the sky. She greeted Professor Jaime and told him that the Zombie King, who couldn't even defeat Zombie's second form, wasn't worthy of being his vessel. Hearing this, the Zombie King was taken aback and was about to step forward to teach her a lesson. The Blood Queen suggested he study her body instead of wasting time on that useless creature. The Zombie King asked if she was claiming to be stronger than him. She replied that he didn't even qualify to compare to her and invited him to try if he didn't believe her. As soon as the Blood Queen finished speaking, the Zombie King charged at her with incredible speed. But the next second, before he could strike, the Blood Queen punched him right in the face. Those watching were stunned. They knew the Zombie King's power, but they hadn't expected him to have no chance to fight back against this woman. Then a loud boom was heard, and the Zombie King was sent flying, breaking through a wall and crashing into another. As he came to his senses, he muttered that she hit as hard as Zombie did. Just then, he noticed the explosive device strapped to Professor Jaime and instantly dashed toward it. He yelled that since they were all so arrogant, they should perish, and with a fierce punch, he hit the nuclear device. But just as the nuclear device was about to explode, the Blood Queen suddenly waved her hand toward it. The device, which was about to destroy everything, miraculously returned to its original state. Those watching were completely dumbfounded. The Blood Queen suddenly let go gently, and the nuclear device immediately crumpled toward the ground. Along with it, the Zombie King was instantly flattened into a pancake. Those watching the fight were beyond shocked, thinking the woman was too powerful. She taunted the Zombie King for daring to challenge Zombie with such little strength. After saying this, the Blood Queen casually lifted her hand, and the next second, she was holding the Zombie King in her grip. She asked him how Zombie dealt with him before. Hearing this, the Zombie King was startled, then showed a look of fear because he once again felt the same terrifying aura as Zombie had. He then cried out in terror, realizing that she and Zombie were both ancient beings of the previous civilization. After saying this, his eyes darkened, and he was scared into unconsciousness again. At that moment, the Blood Queen's gaze returned to normal, and she nonchalantly threw the Zombie King's body, now like a dead pig, onto the ground. Poor Zombie King was, once again, scared into unconsciousness. Seeing this, the chief and the Iron Club president were dumbfounded. On the other side, Professor Jaime and the green-haired subordinate were also speechless. The Blood Queen then asked Professor Jaime if she now qualified to be his vessel. Hearing this, Professor Jaime first paused, then put on a sinister face and said, Of course. Meanwhile, in H City, Violet hurriedly rushed into the city hall. Seeing this, Ah Gao quickly stepped in front of her and told her she couldn't go in because their king was in a special condition. She asked what special condition, and if anything was more important than her issue. After saying this, Violet pushed the door open while shouting loudly, "Zombie, there's bad news!" However, she was startled by the sight of Zombie before her, asking when he had changed like this. Zombie replied that changing the way he lived could be interesting, and asked what she was about to say. Upon hearing this, Violet quickly told him the news of Professor Jaime's escape, but then Zombie interrupted her, saying he already knew. He asked how they could possibly stop the Blood Queen. Hearing this, Violet was startled, asking how he knew since it had just happened less than 10 minutes ago. Zombie explained that the Blood Queen used the power of her lineage, and he knew as soon as she made a move. This left Violet completely baffled, asking what the heck the power of lineage was. After that, she prepared to report this incident to the headquarters, but Zombie suddenly embraced her and told her not to rush off, suggesting they have dinner first, and that he could show her the night view of H City. This made Violet's hair stand on end, and she asked what night view he was talking about. She reminded him not to think she didn't know what he did to Inspector Chen that day, and that she didn't have time to play with him right now. Violet then turned around, ready to leave H City quickly, but just as she reached the door, Zombie spoke again, asking if she wasn't curious about how to use the lineage power. These words made Violet stop in her tracks. Then she turned back and asked if he could use that lineage power too. Hearing this, Violet was reluctant, but in order to obtain useful information, she reluctantly agreed to the date. The scene shifted to the chief, who was being rushed to the emergency room. Someone urged the staff to quickly call the department head, or the world would change. In order to discover the secrets of the lineage power, Violet ultimately accepted Zombie's invitation for a candlelit dinner. But just after Violet learned the method of using the lineage power, Zombie suddenly sat still and didn't move. Violet asked what she should do if she couldn't change back after using it, and urged him to say something. However, before she could finish speaking, Zombie had already transformed into his first form. Violet instantly became angry and grabbed Zombie, asking why he couldn't finish a sentence before reverting. She complained that she gave up something so important to go on a date with him, and he only finished half his sentences. She demanded he change back now. Zombie countered that he never said she had to accompany him and that she came on the date voluntarily. This statement from Zombie completely infuriated Violet, who then turned to the chef nearby and demanded to know where the chilies were and to bring her a kilogram right now. The chef replied that all the chilies in the city had been confiscated. The scene shifted back to the Blood Queen, who had finally put on a set of modern clothes. At this time, Professor Jaime took them to a laboratory. A scientist commented that it was the first time he had seen such an abnormal body, and it simply defied science. He questioned if Zombie's genes could really be used, and told them not to mess up their queen's body. The green-haired subordinate told him to relax and trust Professor Jaime's research, calling him the smartest man in the world. Professor Jaime explained that they had done similar experiments before, and although the queen was not human, there shouldn't be any problem in his lab. The only thing missing now was Zombie's genes. Hearing this, everyone was momentarily stunned, wondering if he was thinking of sending them in front of Zombie to pluck his hair. Professor Jaime told them not to worry, saying he wasn't stupid enough to send them to their doom. They asked what they should do, since Zombie wouldn't just show up on his own. As soon as this was said, the Blood Queen sitting nearby curiously looked toward Professor Jaime. However, Professor Jaime did not speak. Instead, his assistant, the green-haired subordinate, pulled out a jar of green liquid from his clothes. He said they could handle this small matter, and that the bottle contained Zombie's genes. The group was shocked at this revelation, and quickly asked the green-haired subordinate how he had obtained it. It turned out that not long ago, a girl had acquired Zombie's genes, and a spy had secretly drawn a tube of liquid from her. The green-haired subordinate noted that spies could be quite useful. Professor Jaime announced that they could start the experiment now. And so, after a few months of calm, Zhang Lanqi was visiting the chief in the hospital for the second time. The chief asked her if she had sent out the message before he passed out. Zhang Lanqi reassured him that as soon as she got the news, she immediately sent a satellite communication marked as a red-level emergency. She then commented that they were all really useless, asking how, with so many of them, a woman had managed to rescue him. The chief explained that the woman couldn't be explained by science, as the device was about to explode, yet she forcefully suppressed it. At this, Zhang Lanqi's expression turned serious. She concluded that the matter was beyond their control and thought the department head should have received the message by now. Meanwhile, in some underground ruins, the exploration team discovered some strange old objects and couldn't help but be amazed. Just then, one of the team members received an urgent message and quickly went to tell the department head about a situation requiring his personal attention. It seemed humans had found an advanced underground ancient city. As the department head prepared to continue exploring, a corpse sitting at the main gate caught their attention. Everyone was surprised, wondering if it was a real ancient human body, as it looked just like them. A scientist noted that the person person had 134 fractures, as if crushed by some monster. The most terrifying part was that all human tissues had been completely incinerated, which is why it was preserved for 1,000 years. It was essentially just an empty shell with no real research value. Someone commented that a huge conflict must have happened there, and it was unexpected that even such advanced technology couldn't prevent destruction. A subordinate reported that the Beyonders Academy had recently recruited a skilled president who captured Professor Jaime, but for some reason, the newly captured Professor Jaime had been rescued again, and the chief had been severely harmed. Upon hearing this, the department head immediately turned around, saying he was heading back. But just then, a scientist discovered something strange and curiously touched it. The next second, the previously quiet machine suddenly began to vibrate loudly, and countless blue lasers started converging toward the door, eventually forming a human figure. Someone was amazed that machines damaged for 1,000 years could still function. The figure remarked that it never expected to meet a human with such a strong physical form. The team warned the department head to be careful. He dismissed the warning, saying it was just a projection. The projection offered to make him even stronger, as long as he promised to defend human civilization with his life. But before the projection could finish, the department head interrupted, saying that protecting humanity was always his duty. He just wanted to know why their civilization came to an end. The projection didn't answer with words. Instead, it projected a strange human face above its head. It turns out that, more than 1,000 years ago, Earth was different. With 7 continents and 8 oceans and over 100 countries, people wanted to become stronger, so they integrated all resources, making technology reach its peak. The projection mentioned the advancement in armed mechs and starships, saying their technological level achieved an unprecedented height, and that extraterrestrial beings were no match at all. As for those underground creatures, they weren't even worth mentioning. It said any one of their mech warriors could easily defeat them, yet such an advanced civilization was ultimately destroyed by a zombie, no less. Hearing this, the group was visibly shocked. They hadn't expected that the entity that destroyed the last century's civilization was the seemingly ordinary zombie in front of them. Seeing this, a subordinate stepped forward, asking the department head if this guy was just fooling them. The department head said the ancients wouldn't joke about this kind of thing, and pointed out that zombies have existed in the world ever since they were born. He noted that they established all these academies to fight against the zombies, and although they'd always been keeping them under control, they could never completely resolve the issue, suggesting it might be because of this particular zombie. Someone asked how they should deal with zombies since he was so terrifying. The projection responded that its time was short. It said their civilization focused too much on technology, whereas the current generation had taken a completely different path, noting that cultivating the physical body could also reach such heights. As soon as he finished speaking, the door behind him suddenly started spinning, and a golden arm appeared before everyone. The projection declared that this arm was the pinnacle of technological achievement at that time. After saying this, the figure began to flicker and crackle, clearly running out of time. Just at the last moment before disappearing, it warned that no matter what kind of entities appeared in the world, only zombies were humanity's greatest enemy. Seeing the mysterious golden arm before him, the department head quickly instructed his subordinates to store it away. He saluted the now gone projection, saying they would protect this world from now on. He then announced they should go, as the equipment there was no longer of any use. A subordinate asked if they were going to look for the guy in the video now. The department head, retreating to the outside, said they should deal with Professor Jaime first. After all, the world was so big and there were so many zombies, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to find that one. Meanwhile, in H City, Violet also received news that the department head was returning and had called everyone for a meeting, telling Zombie he should go too. Hearing this, Zombie was briefly stunned, asking who the department head was and why he had to go to a meeting. At that moment, in a certain laboratory, Professor Jaime muttered to a petri dish that it was done and that the greatest research in history was about to be created. However, while Professor Jaime was still immersed in his joy, Lanling, hiding on the side and holding a coin, complained that living a life of hiding everywhere and being almost too poor to buy food was awful. Thinking of this, Lanling couldn't help shedding 2 sad tears. Just then, a subordinate leaned in and told Lanling not to be sad, reminding him they were noble vampires and suggesting they start a side business to make some extra money. Lanling asked what kind of side job they could do. The subordinate suggested robbing a bank, saying he noticed one on the way there with slow-working staff and sluggish movements. He claimed that with their skills, they could finish the job within 10 seconds. He argued that, as long as they moved fast, they wouldn't be caught, and once they had money, they wouldn't have to live such miserable lives anymore. The more Lanling thought about it, the more excited he got. A subordinate walked into the office and reported that all the presidents had arrived and the meeting could start now. Hearing this, the department head quickly put on his helmet and then followed the convoy to head for headquarters. However, just as Zombie was arriving in Guangzhou City for the meeting, his hometown, H City, was targeted by a few mysterious individuals. Lanling crouched on the street, wondering why the plan hadn't started yet. No sooner had he finished speaking than a van pulled up in front of him. Seeing this, Lanling quickly told his subordinates to get in the van, and then grabbed the equipment, asking if everything was ready and stressing they must ensure it went flawlessly. At that moment, a subordinate leaned in, saying not to worry, that he had already checked out the place, and this was the time when there were the fewest people around. He reminded them that they were professionals at bank heists. After saying this, the group grabbed their equipment and rushed toward Zombie People's Bank. Meanwhile, in the finance department, Blackie, holding a cup of coffee, asked if the financial statements for the past 2 months had come out yet. A subordinate reported that the total income for H City over the last 2 months amounted to $435.6 billion. Blackie told him to go through the accounts again, saying that as the king's most trusted subordinate, he must ensure there were no discrepancies in H City's finances. But just as he finished speaking, thick smoke began to rise from Zombie People's Bank not far away. It turned out that Lanling had finished the robbery and was now preparing to flee in a van. When Blackie heard this news, he was briefly stunned, asking who dared to rob in H City. At that moment, in front of a 5-star hotel, Lanling was laughing loudly in the car, thrilled that they finally had money. But just then, an angry voice suddenly rang out from behind him. Lanling quickly looked back through the car window, and upon seeing Blackie, he shivered in fear, realizing it must be him. Then he returned to the car and asked his accomplice which bank they had taken from. The accomplice admitted he didn't know because he couldn't read. Lanling realized they must have robbed Zombie People's Bank. Hearing these words, Lanling immediately felt terrible. Then he cautiously peered out the car window again. This glance was so frightening that Lanling's face twisted in horror. When Lanling saw that it was Blackie chasing them, he was startled and immediately urged his accomplice to drive faster, saying that guy was Zombie's most mysterious subordinate, recruited in the year 800. But before he could finish speaking, Blackie had already leaped into the air, and with a bang, his punch hit a skyscraper. In the next second, cars within hundreds of kilometers began to float. Seeing this, Lanling and his gang were stunned, thinking it was too extreme. But before they could think further, Blackie's gaze had already locked on them. Knowing they couldn't escape, Lanling flipped onto the roof of the car, telling his accomplices to go back and report to the Queen, and that he would hold Blackie off. Lanling then tried to provoke Blackie, saying they were both stewards and he wanted to see how much stronger Blackie could be. But before he could finish, Blackie had already punched him fiercely, saying Lanling couldn't compare to him and wasn't even in his league. Blackie then punched him so hard he flew far away. The other 2 accomplices were stunned, wondering how even Zombie's subordinates could be so strong. Meanwhile, in the headquarters hall, city chiefs and presidents from various places had all gathered. Just then, the department head finally arrived. He announced that he fully understood the matter about Professor Jaime's escape, but before that, he had something to show them all. He then instructed his subordinate to bring out the golden arm from the ancient city. Seeing this, everyone looked puzzled. The department head explained that this arm was something he stumbled upon in the ancient city, and it represented the pinnacle of ancient technology. As soon as he said this, everyone present was shocked. Someone asked if, with ancient technology, they couldn't easily handle Professor Jaime and that strange woman. The department head said they didn't need ancient technology to deal with them, and that he had someone else in mind to confront. He explained that according to the ancients, there was a terrifying creature on their planet, and it was this creature that wiped out the ancient civilization. Hearing this, the Iron Club president was momentarily stunned, a certain figure flashing in his mind. He asked if the department head was serious, and what kind of creature could eliminate an advanced ancient civilization. Just as the department head was about to earnestly explain how dangerous this creature was, Zombie approached him, looking thoughtfully at the arm, asking why it looked so familiar to him. Someone asked where this creature might be. The department head admitted he wasn't sure. The ancients had only shared an image of the creature before they completely vanished. Just then, Zombie looked up and asked how they were supposed to use this golden gauntlet. The department head explained that the device was simple to use. Just wear it on your hand and press the button in the middle. He concluded they needed to find this creature quickly and get rid of it once and for all. Upon hearing this, Zombie immediately agreed, saying he'd definitely help. But at that moment, the department head felt as if he had forgotten something and quickly scrutinized Zombie again. This blatant scrutiny made Zombie somewhat embarrassed. He cursed and then hurriedly reached for the golden gauntlet in the center of the room. This action left everyone present with puzzled expressions. But before they could think further, a figure suddenly flew toward the building they were in from a distance. With a loud bang, the figure blasted a hole through a building and continued hurtling toward the conference hall. As the dust settled, it turned out to be Lanling, who had been punched away by Blackie. Seeing this, Violet and Zhang Lanqi were completely bewildered. However, at that moment, another figure shot from the sky, landing with a thud. It turned out to be Blackie in pursuit. Seeing Lanling, who he had knocked into the building, Blackie still felt unsatisfied. He called out to His Majesty. At this, Violet noticed Blackie outside, asking if that wasn't Zombie's subordinate and what he was doing here all of a sudden. Hearing this, Zombie was taken aback, asking why Blackie had suddenly become so reckless. Just then, one of the department head's aides reported that the individual outside was not human, but a zombie. Seeing a zombie daring to strut in there, the presidents, who were the pinnacle of human combat power, couldn't hold back any longer and had all jumped onto Blackie to attack. The Iron Club president yelled, asking if the zombie knew where he was and saying he was too arrogant. Before he could finish speaking, Blackie kicked him in the mouth and then punched the chief, who was still recovering from injuries, next to him. In an instant, both were sent flying by Blackie. Seeing this, Dawn and Violet were stunned, wondering why they always encountered characters of this level and saying it made humans look so useless. Just then, Blackie in the air suddenly released a large amount of black particles, yelling that they dared to obstruct his work. Violet, standing behind, also shouted in horror, warning everyone not to touch these black substances. However, just as everyone was unsure what to do, Zombie flashed in front of Blackie. With a bang, Blackie took a solid punch from Zombie. With his punch, Blackie immediately lost the ability to fight. Not only that, the powerful force of the punch even sent Violet and the others flying back. Seeing this, the subordinates were astonished, telling the department head that this new president was too powerful. However, hearing this, the department head nervously put on the golden glove, realizing Zombie was indeed terrifying. He concluded that the ancients really didn't lie. Just then, Zombie dragged Blackie to the rooftop nearby. Realizing what was happening, Blackie was confused, asking Zombie why he was there too. Zombie explained that they couldn't harm these humans yet. After all, they gave them the city. But before he could finish, a black dot suddenly appeared in the sky. The next second, this dot turned into an unnatural total solar eclipse. Seeing this, everyone showed expressions of disbelief. The entire world turned pitch black. This unusual phenomenon caused panic among the people. Soon after, another figure appeared in the sky. It was the fully evolved Blood Queen. At that moment, the department head who had activated the golden glove also noticed the anomaly in the sky. He realized it was that woman who took Professor Jaime. The Blood Queen in the sky chuckled, daring Zombie to come out, claiming she was invincible now. Several figures suddenly appeared nearby. Seeing the newcomers, Lanling cried out in distress, begging for help. But the Blood Queen's subordinates had just charged into the conference hall when they were suddenly blown away by the department head with a bang. The two subordinates received their final hit, crashing into separate buildings far away. The department head warned the Blood Queen not to interfere. He then told his own people to quickly move the civilians out, as a big conflict was about to happen. The department head immediately swung a punch at the Blood Queen, but she smoothly avoided it. The Blood Queen was completely furious, saying a mere insect dared to strike at her. She then kicked the department head on the chin with her long legs. Seeing this, Violet and the others were totally shocked, realizing this woman was so powerful that even the department head seemed to be no match for her. On the other side, Blackie also watched the battle in the sky, telling Zombie that the fight had started, but Zombie simply extended his hand, saying to let them fight and that it was none of their business. In the instant they clashed, the Blood Queen kicked the department head away, followed by a loud boom. But when the smoke cleared, the department head was unharmed. At that time, the eclipse in the sky also gradually went away. The Blood Queen declared she would deal with him first before getting rid of Zombie. The department head scoffed at her big talk, asking why she kept bringing up Zombie. Hearing this, Violet and the others were confused, wondering why she kept talking about Zombie. Just then, the department head suddenly activated the golden glove. Energy began to gather toward the center of the glove. Seeing this, the Blood Queen was not at all nervous. Instead, she dashed toward him at great speed. Soon, the two figures flew toward each other like arrows. Just as they were about to clash, the Blood Queen clenched her fist quickly, while the department head focused all his power into his golden arm. Then came a loud boom. At the center of the explosion, with a crack, the ancient golden glove was crumpled like a tin can. The department head was then blasted into a tall building with great force. However, the department head was still hanging on. Seeing this, the Blood Queen couldn't help but frown. At this time, the department head, holding his broken arm with the crumpled golden glove, complained that the ancient technology was useless junk and that he might as well do it himself. The Blood Queen admitted that in nearly 1,000 years, he was the strongest human she had encountered. She said that had he been born 1,000 years ago, the outcome would be uncertain, but unfortunately, he was no match for her now. The Blood Queen instantly appeared in front of the department head, but just as she was about to deliver a decisive blow, Violet suddenly appeared behind her. With her blade ready to strike, a terrifying red aura surrounded her. The Blood Queen quickly dodged the attack. This terrifying strike left the Blood Queen surprised. Violet rested the sword on her shoulder and told the Blood Queen that her opponent was her. Seeing this, Zhang Lanqi was shocked, asking how Violet had suddenly changed like this. On the other side, Dawn also instantly transformed, quickly capturing the Blood Queen's subordinate. This scene left the department head surprised, as he hadn't expected Violet's strength to suddenly increase so much. On the other side, Zhang Lanqi and others were completely stunned. The subordinate yelled not to underestimate them. She broke free from Dawn's grasp and created distance by flipping backward. This move left Dawn briefly surprised, not expecting her to escape from her hands. The subordinate taunted Dawn, asking if she thought she could trap her and saying not to treat her like a weakling. Dawn challenged her to show what she was capable of. The vampire sister then rushed toward her, but before she could strike, she was kicked in the chin by Dawn. Then Dawn bent down to gather strength and rushed toward the vampire sister in the air. Dawn struck the vampire sister with another punch to the face. Seeing this, Zhang Lanqi and the others were shocked, asking when Dawn had become so strong. After landing, the vampire sister quickly flipped over, and with the fluid in her hand, she created countless clones in the air. But before she could act, she was kicked again by Dawn. At this point, the vampire sister was speechless, wondering if this person was even human. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Blood Queen quickly swiped forward. Seeing this, Violet quickly drew her own sword. The next second, the city of technology behind her was sliced in two. Someone asked if Violet was always this strong. At that moment, the Blood Queen sneered that Violet had been enhanced too, but she didn't have time to waste on her. She demanded Violet bring Zombie out to her. With that, she activated her lineage power. Instantly, a terrifying aura burst forth from her body. However, Violet showed no intention of backing down. Violet admitted she knew she was no match for her, but warned the Blood Queen that if she thought that was all it took to challenge Zombie, she should forget it. Hearing this, the Blood Queen was briefly stunned, but before she could think further, Violet suddenly covered her face and burst into laughter, saying she would show her something fun and calling out her second form. After saying this, the skin on Violet's face began to crack and crumble away. Seeing this, Zhang Lanqi and the chief were dumbfounded, asking what she was preparing to do. Violet suddenly roared toward the sky. The next second, countless waves of purple energy radiated outward from her. This terrifying energy nearly blew away the chief and others, and even the Blood Queen was surprised. All because, at that moment, Violet had transformed into another form, not only growing a pair of sharp horns on her forehead, but also having her facial features turn into those of a demon's skull. Someone wondered if she was still human and how she had turned into this terrifying form. The Blood Queen was in disbelief, asking if Violet had mastered the lineage power too. Downstairs, Zombie, who was watching, was speechless. On the other side, Dawn was also stunned. The Blood Queen was furious and started mumbling in anger. Violet asked if she was confused about her life. Violet then declared there was no need for useless words between them. As soon as Violet finished speaking, the Blood Queen jumped above her. However, facing her sudden attack, Violet was unfazed. As the Blood Queen was about to strike down with her weapon, Violet quickly drew her sword. The moment the blade was unsheathed, Violet used her own life force to enhance it. With the upgraded red blade swung out, the Blood Queen was instantly sliced in half. Following that, Violet accelerated in an instant. The next second, countless slashes appeared on the Blood Queen's body, and the slashes were so fine it even cut her cells into pieces. The Blood Queen was cut into nothingness. Everyone was stunned by Violet's display of power. When the aide reported that Violet had eliminated every cell in the Blood Queen's body, the chief suddenly shouted in horror that this was totally impossible. Hearing this, Zhang Lanqi frowned, deep in thought. As for the department head, the pinnacle of human combat power, he had no words. Despite this, Violet showed no sign of relaxing. She looked back into the sky, saying she knew the Blood Queen wasn't this frail and asking if she was planning a sneak attack. Clumps of fluid in the sky started to gather and condense. Flesh and bones started to reassemble. It wasn't long before the Blood Queen reappeared unharmed in front of everyone. Seeing this, both the chief and Iron Club president were dumbfounded, asking if they were even human. Zombie, watching, remarked that the Blood Queen was getting serious now, saying that he and Blackie decided to move to a better spot. At this point, Violet still spoke casually, saying that Zombie told her the Blood Queen was a millennium-old creature, and truly, she couldn't be judged with normal logic. Hearing this, the department head was briefly stunned, but just as he was about to react, the golden glove in his hand, which had already deformed, suddenly started to react. On the other side, Zombie and Blackie had already reached the best spot to watch the battle. At that moment, the Blood Queen raised her hand, and the next second, the previously clear sky instantly turned cloudy. She declared they weren't done yet. Saying this, she darted up to the sky. Seeing this, the Blood Queen quickly drew her life force sword, and the next second, a high-rise building was sliced into a dozen pieces. Those sliced buildings were headed straight toward Violet, but facing the rapidly approaching debris, Violet simply raised her hand, and the giant obstacle was sliced in half. Just then, the Blood Queen suddenly appeared in front of her, taking Violet by surprise and punching her in the face. Violet no longer held back her strength, gathering all her power and swinging at the Blood Queen. The next second, the immense blade energy actually split the city in two. Seeing this, Zhang Lanqi and another were so frightened that their style of drawing changed, and even Zombie couldn't help but be amazed. Despite this, the Blood Queen was not injured at all. Violet wondered if she was still intact. Meanwhile, the department head was currently facing a big problem. The golden glove he was wearing could not be taken off. Just then, Violet landed on the side of a building, but before she could steady herself, the Blood Queen charged at her and kicked her in the chin. The Blood Queen told her not to think that activating her second form was special, and that in front of her, Violet was nothing. At that moment, the Blood Queen raised her hand to gather a burst of energy. and the next second, Violet crashed into a skyscraper. Then her long sword was hurled into her, pinning her to the building. Zhang Lanqi and others were beyond shocked. However, as the two of them fought fiercely, something strange happened to the department head on the other side. He wondered what was wrong with the glove. While the department head was confused, some golden energy suddenly appeared in his body fluid, followed by a voice in his mind saying it would be borrowing his body. This voice was that of the ancient person from the ancient ruins. Meanwhile, Violet, who had been knocked out, finally regained consciousness. She pulled the long sword out of her chest, saying she might not be able to stop her, but asking what the Blood Queen could really do to her. Seeing Violet's incredible power level, Zhang Lanqi grabbed Zombie's clothes and shook him around, saying she wanted to become like them too. But Zombie declined her, claiming it was too intense. However, just then, a loud boom suddenly came from afar, causing everyone present to be briefly stunned. Someone asked what that sound was. The chief looked up at the sky with a face full of terror. It turned out that at this moment, enormous mechanical limbs had appeared in the sky, accompanied by a terrifying laughter, declaring that he had finally come back to life. With a booming sound, a giant mechanical foot stomped down and flattened a city, leaving the people inside dumbfounded. Just as everyone was still trying to understand, another loud boom occurred, and the building Zombie was on was reduced to rubble. Seeing this, Zombie quickly bounced around the ruins, saving the presidents who couldn't escape in time. But just after he threw everyone out, the mecha in the sky suddenly reached out to grab him. Once it had Zombie in its grip, the mecha quickly clenched its fist. However, at that moment, the Blood Queen suddenly darted in, and Violet quickly followed her. Unexpectedly, the two of them zipped onto the top of the mecha's head. The department head started to regain consciousness, asking what exactly he was trying to do. The ancient being apologized to the department head, saying that for the sake of a better future for humanity, he had no choice but to use him. As his words finished, a brand new mecha battlesuit covered his body. Seeing this, the chief couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and the stainless steel chief was so frightened he couldn't even speak. Just then, Violet on top suddenly noticed something in the mecha's hand. It turned out that Zombie was currently being held in its grip. Seeing this, the Blood Queen and Violet quickly charged at the ancient being, but their combined attack was easily neutralized by the ancient being. With a whoosh, they were both bound by the ancient being. He commented that it took them several centuries to study Zombie's genes, and yet these two women used it as a mere boost, calling it superficial. At that moment, under the pressure of the mecha, Zombie activated his second form. With Zombie performing a 360-degree spin on the spot, the mecha's fingers also started to rotate, and it even affected its entire mechanical arm. Seizing this opportunity, Zombie jumped up, aiming to smash its head, but with a boom, the mecha's other arm smacked him down. From a distance, the ancient person spread his arms, saying it had been 1,000 years, and the day had finally come. Watching Zombie struggling, the ancient person was thrilled, telling him to show his ultimate form. As soon as his words finished, Zombie slowly opened those seemingly harmless eyes. Zombie had activated his third form. With a boom, the mechanical arm was instantly flung away by Zombie. Seeing this, the Blood Queen's eyes widened, but the ancient mecha showed no sign of fear, asking if Zombie was looking down on him, calling him a hateful creature. Zombie did not have any words to say to the ancient being. At this moment, Zhang Lanqi, watching from the ground, was dumbfounded, asking what all this was. Then Zombie suddenly sped up, darting toward the top of the mecha's head. Seeing this, the ancient person coldly scoffed. The hatch of the mecha slowly opened, and rows of robots began to come out. Someone asked if this was ancient technology. At this moment, the chief and Iron Club president were so frightened they dared not breathe. However, these seemingly strong robots were like paper in front of Zombie. With a tearing sound, the robot was instantly ripped in half by Zombie. As more and more robots appeared, Zombie clenched his fist to gather strength, and then with a loud bang, those robots were instantly turned into scrap metal by Zombie. At that moment, the ancient being tapped his fist, asking Zombie why he wasn't using his full strength and if he was still looking down on him. Right after his words finished, several giant mechas came out from rifts in space. Someone wondered if that wasn't too much. The ancient being said he had seen Zombie's true form on the last night before dawn, and that this current form was not it. These words made Zombie pause, but before he could think deeply, the giant mecha charged its fist at him with a boom. The wind pressure from the giant punch destroyed half of the city. Zombie was blasted all the way to the moon. Although the blow dazed him, it did not cause him any lasting harm. At that moment, the department head inside the ancient being suddenly became defiant, yelling at the ancient person to look at the mess he had made, and asking if this was the outcome he wanted. The ancient person yelled back to be quiet, saying he must eliminate Zombie this time. Then he teleported the giant mecha to the moon. At this moment, people like Zhang Lanqi on the ground were beyond shocked. Zombie suddenly dodged to the side, avoiding an attack by the giant mecha, then jumped on the spot and appeared in front of the mecha. Seeing this from Earth, the chief exclaimed in awe. At that moment, Zombie suddenly bent in the air to gather strength, and the next second, he fiercely punched the mecha in the eye. With a series of bangs, the ancient mecha immediately collapsed on the moon. At this moment, high in Earth's atmosphere, the ancient being was also in shock. The department head's voice, speaking through him, reviewed Zombie's records. Not only had he managed H City exceptionally well, generating hundreds of billions in tax revenue, but he had also helped humanity multiple times. The department head wanted to know why they couldn't just get along. The ancient being, looking up at the moon, questioned the idea of peaceful coexistence, pointing to Zombie's current intimidating state. He argued that originally zombies were supposed to be a weak group, but this particular one had appeared, and now the fate of the human race depended entirely on his mood. He insisted they couldn't allow such a creature to exist, and therefore if he wasn't one of them, he had to be eliminated. As soon as he said this, the mechas in space began to reassemble. The ancient mecha not only successfully returned to its original state, but also acquired a glowing long sword. Declaring divine punishment, the mechas in space began to move. The moon was simultaneously pierced from multiple locations. Then a great surge of energy was blasted towards Zombie. Despite this, Zombie was unharmed, and even scoffed dismissively, saying sometimes bigger wasn't necessarily stronger. Hearing this, the ancient being immediately felt a great sense of danger, but before he could react, Zombie suddenly raised his hand and snapped his fingers loudly. The next second, all the ancient mechas shattered instantly, and even the entire moon trembled. Such a terrifying display of power made Zhang Lanqi very uneasy, and she quickly gave the order to move the nearby citizens out of the area. Back to the action, Zombie was suddenly in front of the ancient being, and then delivered a powerful punch that smashed into the ancient being's face. The powerful force immediately knocked him into the deep sea, but it didn't end there. Zombie then plunged his hands into the ground. Meanwhile, the presidents in the city were helping civilians escape. Just as Zhang Lanqi, holding a baby, was preparing to leave, the ground beneath her suddenly shook. It turned out that Zombie was ripping apart the earth with his hands. Seeing this, everyone was terrified. With a crack, the area in front of Zombie instantly split open, making everyone feel like an earthquake was happening. Zombie exerted great force, and the next second, the ground around him was forcefully torn apart. Instantly, a great fissure going to the horizon appeared in the center of the city. Seeing this, the chief was stunned, and Zhang Lanqi accidentally fell into the fissure. Despite this, the fissure continued to extend, and even the sea was split in two. On the other side, the Iron Club president quickly saved Zhang Lanqi. However, at this moment, Zhang Lanqi witnessed an unbelievable scene. The ancient being who had been smashed into the sea suddenly reappeared, and the next second, Zombie punched him, smashing him into a mountain. The Iron Club president remarked that this was Zombie's destructive power. However, before he could finish speaking, a tsunami suddenly arose from the sea, revealing Zombie's fourth form. Seeing this, the department head was shocked, asking what kind of creature this guy was. Violet was also confused, asking how Zombie could transform again. The Blood Queen beside them couldn't believe it, saying she had never seen this before, and that the face she saw before dawn was this one. He then sped up and flew into the sky. Watching Zombie now fully unleashed, Blackie suddenly cried out in horror that it was over, and that the ancient being was doomed. He then rushed away to find safety. The ancient being in the sky laughed loudly, claiming he had waited 1,000 years for this battle. But before he could finish, Zombie suddenly raised his hand, and the next second, the ancient being's armor instantly shattered. Zombie clenched his fist, and the ancient being was crushed into a ball. Just then, a beam of energy shot straight into the sky, instantly turning the ancient being into scrap metal. With the ancient being's control gone, the department head was finally freed from his struggle, though by then his life was nearly spent. Someone cried out that the department head was going to perish, but just then, Zombie snapped his fingers at the department head, and the next second, his cells began to regenerate. Seeing this, the chiefs were dumbfounded, and the Blood Queen beside them was in disbelief. Violet also widened her eyes, realizing Zombie could even do that. At that moment, the department head suddenly woke up from his unconscious state. When he looked at Zombie, who had acted to restore him, he finally understood why the ancient being was desperate to end him. It was because Zombie was too powerful, a kind of power that was deeply terrifying. The onlookers on the ground were beyond shocked. Just then, Violet suddenly appeared in front of Zombie. Zombie, now back to his original form, asked how the lineage power was working for her. Violet angrily replied that it was useless, and asked him to look at what he had done, saying they didn't even have a home anymore. It turns out Zombie tore the earth with his bare hands, instantly splitting the ground, and due to this event, even caused the southern continent to shift over by 130 kilometers. Just like that, 2 months quickly passed. Since humans had gotten away before the battle, they weren't greatly harmed. However, the rebuilding of their homes was entirely left to Zombie citizens. In the office at this moment, the department head was looking at the data in front of him and fell into deep thought. The documents displayed the complete data of Zombie from his first to his fourth form. Inspector Chen walked in with a cup of coffee, asking if the department head needed her for something. He asked about her last visit to H City, and suggested she go buy some eggs later, and then they would pay a visit to the new president of H City. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Blood Tribe's new city was also gradually starting construction, and Lanling was in charge of this project. A subordinate asked where Lanling got the money for this hearing. This Lanling broke out in a cold sweat. It turned out all his money was loaned to him by Blackie. Apparently, the king had said it was better to lend them money directly rather than letting them rob banks and cause trouble. The subordinate noted that with the 20% interest rate, they would need to work for them for at least 300 years to pay it off, calling Blackie a truly dreadful capitalist. As for the Blood Queen, at this moment, she was essentially scared into solitude by Zombie. She hadn't expected Zombie to have a fourth form and doubted she could ever defeat him in this lifetime. She would sadly shed tears as she mourned her chances at defeating him. And so, Zombie's wish for zombies and humans to coexist was finally realized. But what he didn't know was that deep within an underground city left by an ancient civilization, a man suddenly approached the corpse of the ancient being. Unexpectedly, this person was the long-missing Professor Jaime. He vowed that as long as he wasn't gone, he would never give up. On the other side, the doorbell rang. Zombie quickly opened the door asking who it was. Unexpectedly, it was Violet, who had come early in the morning to hurry him to work. Soon after, Zombie arrived at the Beyonders Academy. At that moment in the gymnasium, seeing that it was about time, Zhang Lanqi waved her hand, welcoming their new chief, Zombie, to say a few words. As her voice fell, the students in the hall greeted Zombie. Looking at the neatly arranged freshmen before him, Zombie was also a bit confused and then awkwardly touched his bald head, wishing everyone good morning and saying they should be hungry, as he brought some eggs. He asked the former chief if he had been replaced. The former chief replied there was no choice, as he couldn't win against Zombie. Meanwhile, in the department head's office, Inspector Chen suddenly rushed in, saying the situation was serious. Saying this, she handed a cell phone to the department head, explaining the president was calling. Hearing this, the department head was immediately startled. The department head was about to bring a gift to Zombie when he received a call from the president. Unexpectedly, the revival of the ancient being was already known worldwide. Inspector Chen was surprised, saying they hadn't told anyone. The department head asked how such a big event could be kept secret, and noted that the exchange meeting was about to start, with too many things happening at once. He then asked how the eggs he requested were. Hearing this, Inspector Chen quickly lifted 2 bags, saying here they were. With that, the department head personally brought the gifts to Zombie's doorstep. Since he had made him the chief, assigning him to a duty should not be a problem. The department head rang Zombie's doorbell, but the door was opened by Violet. What surprised him most was that Violet was dressed in a beautiful maid outfit. Seeing this, the department head was briefly stunned. Asking Violet what was going on, Violet immediately denied it was what he thought. The department head was completely speechless, thinking they were playing games like this, and that even though Zombie got promoted, this was too bold. At that moment, Zhang Lanqi only just realized her current situation, telling the department head he had it wrong. However, the department head didn't want to hear their explanations and turned around, ready to leave. Zhang Lanqi and Violet quickly stepped in front of him, saying they were just there to celebrate Zombie's promotion. The department head questioned celebrating by dressing up like that, saying he had never seen them wear such outfits. But before he could finish, he noticed that Dawn was also in the room, with the former chief playing a card game with Zombie. The Iron Club president then made a party popper explode with a bang. At this moment, the department head was speechless. These people were just too much. Just then, various fruits and vegetables were thrown into the air, and with expert slashing technique, it turned out to be the Iron Club president demonstrating his knife skills. He was holding 2 plates of sushi prepared for Zombie, but suddenly he noticed a familiar figure standing at the door and immediately exclaimed in horror that he did all this because Zombie forced him. Fortunately, by this time, the department head was completely numb. He cleared his throat and announced that since everyone was here, he would save the trouble of calling a meeting, and that there was something very important they needed to discuss. At this point, everyone was sitting around a table. Someone asked if he wasn't the boss of the humans. Hearing this, the department head quickly explained that he was not, saying he was actually just in charge of this province. As he prepared to remove his face shield, Zombie and the others looked on in anticipation, but the department head only revealed half of his face, explaining that their planet only has 2 continents and only 2 countries, Country A and Country B. The department head then continued to explain the history of the countries and the relationship between them, mentioning an exchange meeting that happens for peace, but mainly for displaying military might. Hearing this, Zombie was immediately surprised, asking what this exchange meeting was. The department head compared it to a school sports day or a military exercise, but noted that Country B wins the competition every time. Zombie thought that sounded pointless. It explained that in the last round there was a zombie controlling event, and one of their provinces subdued more than 8 million zombies, meaning their strength was many times greater than theirs. This statement sent a chill down Zombie's back. This competition was going to rely on him. At this moment, Zombie was completely speechless, realizing that this girl still believed he was human. Fortunately, at this time, the department head interjected to ease the tension, saying not to worry, this time they were the ones managing the events, so there wouldn't be a zombie fighting event again. Meanwhile, on the other side of the earth, 2 tall and beautiful women walked into an office. At that time, the leader of Country B threw a document on the table and told them to take a look, saying it was a photo sent from Country A. Hearing this, the 2 women quickly picked up the photo from the table and examined it closely. When they saw that the moon had been pierced by a mecha, they were shocked. The leader noted that according to intelligence, it was very likely that Country A had acquired the technology of the ancient people. He He added that next month, the president of country A would visit their country, and since the two women were his most capable subordinates, he called them there to personally investigate this matter. He also mentioned that there was significant concern from the king about their sister joining the rebellion, and if they completed this task well, he would naturally speak on their behalf. They understood, replying to Lord Prime Minister. In a mysterious laboratory, Professor Jaime was watching an experiment with a serious expression. He announced that component, number 1, was fully powered. As his voice finished, other staff also indicated they were ready. They were planning to revive the ancient person. The green-haired subordinate called out to Professor Jaime that they could start now, but he questioned if they could really bring back the ancient person, who had been gone for 1,000 years and become a specimen. Professor Jaime told him not to worry, saying there was nothing in biology he couldn't achieve, and ordered them to start. Upon his order, a subordinate immediately switched the experiment's circuit breaker. With a loud bang, the entire laboratory was engulfed in a bright light. Someone commented that if they really could revive that ancient person, then it would be a real miracle. As the intense electricity continuously crackled over the body of the ancient being, in just a short while, suddenly, thick white smoke billowed out in the laboratory, and everyone was extremely nervous. After all, bringing a person back to life was something they had never done before. Just then, the ancient being in the laboratory suddenly coughed. Seeing this, the green-haired subordinate was overjoyed, exclaiming that they did it. But as the white smoke slowly dissipated, what appeared was a bald, greasy, middle-aged man. At this, the green-haired subordinate exploded, questioning if they got the program wrong, asking where the ancient being and the super-cool mecha warrior were, and how it had turned into this. Saying this, the green-haired subordinate dashed into the laboratory, demanding to know where the ancient being went and who he was. Hearing this, the middle-aged man said with a wronged expression that he was the ancient being. The green-haired subordinate called him a liar, saying the ancient being they saw before was so handsome, and asking how he could compare. The man explained that he was an engineer and didn't know how to fight, so he designed a suit of armor for himself, asking what was wrong with making himself look a bit cooler. Hearing this, Professor Jaime was speechless, realizing that after all this effort, they had only revived an engineer. But just as he was about to turn away and leave, the engineer inside suddenly spoke up, saying that he and Professor Jaime were the same kind of people and asking if he wanted to talk. Professor Jaime told him to go ahead and not waste his time. The engineer said he knew they started from different points, but their goals were the same, so they could cooperate. Professor Jaime asked about cooperating, pointing out that the engineer had already been defeated by Zombie. He added that he thought the engineer might be a stronger vessel than a vampire, but it turned out to be a waste of his time. The engineer told him to give up on his idea, saying they had studied Zombie's genes for thousands of years and Professor Jaime's method simply wouldn't work. He explained that what was scary about Zombie was not his strength, but his capability of powering up endlessly. He concluded that as of today, they were the two smartest people in the world. He said Professor Jaime had expertise in biology and control over Zombie's genes, and he possessed unparalleled engineering. At this, Professor Jaime and the others were startled. The engineer asked what he thought. Hearing this, Professor Jaime pushed up his glasses and stepped forward, agreeing that they could work well together. Meanwhile, Violet screamed in horror on the other side, asking why the department head would actually let Zombie be the president's bodyguard. Violet worried that Zombie could potentially harm the president, while Zombie merely pointed at himself in confusion. The department head explained he had no choice, saying Country B was not peaceful, and that since they knew about the ancient being, the president's safety might be at risk. With that statement, Violet and Zhang Lanqi found themselves unable to argue. After all, Zombie was likely the only one capable of ensuring the president's safety. The department head stood up, announcing that since there were no objections, it was decided. He reminded Zombie that he had always wanted to enter the upper echelons of humanity, and that one word from the president would resolve any questions about his identity. However, he stressed that Zombie's identity must remain hidden for now, as having a zombie in a government position would be historically volatile. Lastly, he announced that from that day, all the academy presidents in Guangzhou province would be under Zombie's command. He advised Zombie to bring 2 trusted aides for safety. He finished by urging Zombie not to disgrace Guangzhou province on this trip to Country B. With that, Zombie left the meeting and returned to H City. At this moment, in the city government office, Blackie and other subordinates had gathered. Zombie informed them that the governor had ordered him to serve as the president's bodyguard and asked who wanted to come with him. Blackie declined, saying there was too much work in finance. Gu also hesitantly stated that he needed to maintain public order in H City and had no time. Only Lang and Fur eagerly agreed, as they had long been bored of staying in H City. Unexpectedly, once they were outside, Zombie tied them up again like pets. At this moment, Fur and Lang were speechless. Just then, Violet and Zhang Lanqi walked over. Seeing Fur and Lang lying on the ground, Zhang Lanqi immediately exclaimed with shining eyes, "What cute little dogs!" Saying this, she squatted in front of Fur intending to pet him. But at that moment, Fur suddenly roared, warning her that if her hand touched him, he would bite her to death. This sudden change scared Zhang Lanqi. Violet explained that they were Zombie's subordinates, not little dogs. She then turned to Zombie, telling him to come with her, as the president wanted to see him. In no time, Zombie left under Violet's guidance. Upon arriving in a conference hall, it was already filled with professionals sent from various provinces. When they saw Zombie and others enter, one masked man immediately came forward and scoffed, asking if Guangzhou province had run out of people to send such a nobody, and asked for the previous chief, claiming he could take on 10 of them by himself. However, before he could finish, Zombie's fist had already landed on his face. With a bang, the man was smashed into a nearby wall. Zombie asked what he had just been saying. At this moment, the people in the hall were shocked. This newcomer from Guangzhou province was incredibly strong. Soon after, Zombie was called into the president's office. Zombie was very nervous, as this was his first time being a bodyguard. The president remarked that the department head from Guangzhou said he was very strong and fully capable of being a bodyguard, but she still wanted to ask, in case of danger, how he would protect her. Hearing this, Zombie scratched his head, saying danger didn't really exist for him. The president laughed, saying that was very good, worthy of being the man chosen by the department head of Guangzhou, and that she trusted him. Just now, in a ruined city in Country B, a tall, beautiful woman was seen waiting for something. Suddenly, a big zombie over 2 meters tall wearing a mask approached her. The zombie, Ashi, reported that the equipment she wanted was ready, and the zombie army was also prepared. The woman praised him, thanked him for his hard work, and then emerged from the ruins. Seeing this, several subordinate zombies quickly followed. Soon, the woman reached the front of the zombie legion and shouted, asking if they knew why humans always fought endlessly. Claiming humans were selfish creatures, she announced that the president of Country A was coming for a visit soon, and their mission was to assassinate her. She explained that many people asked her why they did this, but this was just humans reaping what they sow. She acknowledged that zombies did cause trouble at the outbreak, but they were insignificant compared to human technology. She accused humans of continuing to develop weapons and having military exercises where they exterminated zombies, saying this was actually just an excuse for infighting between Country A and B. She also accused them of hiding the fact that zombies were also conscious. She added that because of the war, many kind humans were scattered by their artillery, and countless of their conscious zombies had been killed without mercy. In reality, humans and zombies could have lived together all this time. Her goal was to overthrow Country A and B and unify the world. Hearing this, the members of the rebellion excitedly raised their hands, shouting, "To coexistence!" Meanwhile, Zombie was leisurely drinking afternoon tea while they were on a private jet on the way to Country B. The scene shifts back to Country B, where at the airport, reporters had already started a global broadcast, all because this exchange meeting had become the focus of the entire world. Soon, a special plane flew over the city. A security officer warned them not to let anything happen to the president of Country A after she landed. Someone else asked if their sister might take action now. The officer guessed that knowing her personality, she would even blow up the plane if she could. Meanwhile, on a bustling street, a suspicious human was with a large figure. The human claimed everything was arranged, and they would send the president of Country A to the afterlife. However, before he could finish his sentence, a masked zombie next to him suddenly started convulsing, then uncontrollably collapsed to his knees. The human asked what was wrong, and said this was no time for jokes. Ashi heard this but did not respond. Instead, he suddenly looked up at the plane above, as he seemed to sense something both familiar and terrifying on board. Just then, the private jet of the president of Country A finally arrived at the airport, and officials and reporters from Country B quickly gathered around. Suddenly, the plane's door slowly opened, but the person who stepped out was not the president of Country A, but Zombie, wearing a suit and tie for the first time. Seeing this, Ashi quickly grabbed the walkie-talkie and shouted, "Danger! Stop!" Hearing this, a blonde zombie was briefly stunned, wondering why he suddenly felt a sense of fear. Even the boss on the high-rise couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat and immediately ordered the rebellion, "This guy is not the president. Everyone stand down." At this moment, the scene of Zombie's appearance was broadcasted around the world. When people saw Zombie's odd appearance, their reaction was utter confusion and surprise. On the other side, the twin sisters were also taken aback by what they saw on the screen, asking who this guy was. The other sister said he seemed to be a bodyguard listed with the president's group. The department head on the plane spoke to Zombie, praising him for doing well and reminding him of his task, which was to take a bullet for the president. Hearing this, Zombie was speechless, wondering why he needed to do so much for a single bullet when he could catch missiles. And with that jump, that's where the video ends. Smash 3K likes and drop 500 comments if you want part 2 ASAP. I'll drop the next part real quick.